What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto got the daughter of a feudal lord pregnant? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description box to original creator of this beautiful creation. It was all nice and cozy in the chill room as the lads of many SAS operators were relaxing in the room reading the newspaper or watching the TV with the game on. Cups of tea were laid out onto coffee tables along with snacks. One person was just about to sip his tea when suddenly, "You lost them," came a roar down the corridor. Everyone stared blankly at the door in silence until one person dropped his mug of tea from the sudden shout. Down the corridor was the superior officer of the base, Lieutenant Colonel Macmillan, who was facing his angry subordinate and friend Captain John Price. "It was an accident, Price, we had no idea that could happen." "Accident, my bloody old ass, Macmillan. Do you have any idea who they just sent through that goddamn portal?" "There were 3 people sent through there, you would have to elaborate on which one." "My adopted son Macmillan, the blonde-haired blue-eyed lad that I was going on about for years that would do me proud as a father for his son." Macmillan's eyes widened. "Oh bollocks. Bollocks indeed, mate. It's not that, Price, even if you have adopted him his biological parents are still searching for him." "Is that Namikaze fucker still trying? I thought he learned his lesson not to do that back in central London where his group of hired thugs were tasked in abducting Naruto 3 years ago would have made him think twice. He almost caused an international incident where they shot up Heathrow Airport where my son was there at the time disembarking from his flight from Japan. It got so bad that the SAS had to be called in. How he got away with it I will never know. Yes, and I recalled that Naruto had cleared most of the thugs by the time teams were given the green light to engage. Yep, I taught him well. And you should believe in him that he will be fine. He is not a child but a proud member of the SAS." "Yeah, you're right, sorry for shouting." "No offense taken, mate." Macmillan nodded to his friend. "And what of his biological mother?" "Kushina Uzumaki and her twin daughters have taken the correct approach and are currently earning his forgiveness by not bribing him back into the family but giving him the space that the needs and a heartfelt apology for his neglect. She was foolish, yet she still has a heart in her. Not only that, she still has her fiery personality in her, as it was announced back in Japan that she divorced that bastard's ass and split up the companies that were the Namikaze's main fortune and income was coming from." "Really, when was that?" Price asked. "It was announced 2 weeks ago back in Japan. It all happened with an infamous scandal about Minato Namikaze having an affair with some Haruno slag, British slang for slut, who was the head of family branch company that was allied with the Namikazes." Macmillan said with a smile. "I take it Kushina's didn't take tis well," said a chuckling Price. "On the contrary, it was the opposite, she took it even better. The lass gave him a deserved ass-kicking and divorced his ass and legally split up the company along with the Senjus and some other family companies that were mostly allied with the Uzumakis and wanted no ties with the Namikazes ever. And Kushina denounced her Namikaze name to just Uzumaki now." Macmillan smirked. "Wow, do you think the lad will forgive her now?" "Probably, but the problem is it's because that is why she wants to see him about it." Macmillan suddenly went from joking to serious in a sudden 180-degree turn. "Wait, what?" Price was suddenly caught unaware. "You heard me, Price. I heard she is in the UK, right now," Macmillan said gravely. Price glanced out the window for a brief second. "So where is she now?" he asked. "We don't know." Macmillan shook his head. "What the hell do you mean you don't know? She is the CEO of Uzucore, for Christ's sakes, doesn't she have an escort? She disappeared from her hotel room along with her daughters in London 2 days ago, leaving a note saying that she will be right back and do not look for her." "And they did?" Price said incredulously. "Price, they knew she will be fine because she was ex-Special Forces, also known as the Red Death, and she." "Crash. Where the hell is my son, Databane?" yelled out a furious female down the corridor. "What the hell, gaw, slam. Who the bloody fuck let her in? Crash, *arg. Who cares about that? What I want to know is how the hell did a civilian get in this base?" "That's no civilian ghost, that is one angry tomato-head beast of a woman known as the Red Death that is storming our base," commented a Russian-accented man. Boom. That unfortunate person came through the office door and in came an angry mother with 2 daughters frantically trying to calm her down and apologize to everyone that had been caught up in her fury. If Macmillan and Price's experience in Chernobyl and Pripyat was bad and scary, then this woman came close to that experience. As the saying goes, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Good morning Mrs. K. Death Stare Air I mean Ms. Uzumaki. Kushina gave out a huff in annoyance at that title. And walked up to Price and held him by the collar and lifted him effortlessly in the air with superhuman strength. And pulled out his Colt M1911 and held it up to his head. Price, you know where my son is, tell me now. She roared in her maternal fury. Click asterisk. Drop him, said a Scottish man with a mohawk holding a P226 pistol against her head. Stand down Soap, she's friendly, commanded Price. Sir, she tore up most of the base in her rampage. Was anyone killed? Said Macmillan. No. Good, mark that as a training exercise for expecting the unexpected. Soap McTavish sweat dropped and looked out the door to see the carnage she caused with multiple elite men buried in walls and bent over window sill when they were launched through the glass, and even one guy was dangling from his head being buried in the ceiling. Tables and chairs were flipped over and some smashed apart, and the TV had a gaping hole in the screen of where someone's head used to be in, and a ceiling fan off the ceiling and crashed on the floor. Yes sir, he said as he left, dragging out Nikolai to go clear up the mess. Gomenase, we are sorry for intruding and causing Amos, but we wanted to see our Nissan, said the two twins, one that was a long-haired natural redhead like Kushina and the other a natural blonde-haired girl in pigtails tied down to the back of her head, and the pigtails were trailing down her back. Kushina was dressed in her Armani brand business suit with a white shirt underneath the jacket that meant the word, serious business, but could still look tea wearing it while she was kicking your ass. The twins were wearing a white button-up shirt that clung to their figures and short skirts, and the blonde was the only one who wore stockings, while the red-haired twin wore white knee-high socks. In hindsight, they were adorable in the way they apologized, as they were both crying tears at the amount of trouble their mother was causing. It's alright little lasses, she is just concerned for Naruto, that's all. Kushina put Price down and calmed down a little bit. So you do know where my Sochi is at? She questioned, not toning her level of glaring down. I'll have you know that he is legally my son as well. Price pointed out. TCHI will admit you are much better father figure for him than that bastard back home. Now mind the language. Your children are present, said Macmillan. Whatever, now answer my question, where is my Naru-chan? Demanded Kushina when her maternal fury instincts kicked in again. Price and Macmillan were now sweating nervously in their spots. Kushina was now tapping her foot on the floor impatiently. Well, I'm waiting. Kushina, I don't think I am authorized to say this. Cut the bullshit and tell me. Databane, she yelled, even further annoyed. Alright, we'll tell you, but this must not be mentioned to anyone outside, especially to the other countries and the Namakazes. This is a Class S secret. Do you swear on your life and your daughters that this will not be uttered to anyone? Kushina and the daughters both nodded. Good, now I hate to say this, but yesterday at 4:32 p.m. Naruto is declared Mia, announced Macmillan. Back on the outside of the office, as the operators were clearing up, they heard a loud gunshot and angry screaming and shouting. 3 men, Soap, Ghost and Roach, charged into the office, weapons loaded with G3 and an M16A4 assault rifles and a G36C carbine. Price, Macmillan, Soap shouted as they breached through the door, weapons loaded. And what they all saw was Kushina being restrained in a full Nellen hold by Price, and the twins were trying to wrestle the gun that was in her hands, and she kept firing off a few shots. Macmillan sat there unflinching but had a small cut on his cheek, and the window behind him had a hole shot through it. Kushina was cursing at Macmillan at the news of her son's disappearance through this enigma that was simply known as the Gate. And she cried her heart out for the blonde son that she had worked so hard to earn his forgiveness that she may never get back. And so did the twins at the thought of never seeing their Ni-chan ever again. Even if they haven't interacted much, they still loved as a brother. Naruto, Kushina wailed in sorrow as she collapsed onto the floor of the office, heartbroken at the loss. The 3 men slowly lowered their guns and gave a silent prayer for their fellow brother in arms. They knew he would be fine, because he is the one who dares. Unknown location. The other side of the gate. Despair, the one emotion that I have experienced the least. Not once have I ever felt so helpless in my situation, with no help coming my way. I was alone in this unknown place with no reinforcements or rescue party coming anytime soon, or never at all. What was the whole point to this mission anyway? Oh yeah, me and my team were sent to investigate an anomaly that was this gate right here. Well, it was all really interesting at first until I volunteered myself to venture through the gate, and by the time I got to the other end of the gate, it collapsed. The connection from my world to this had just disconnected all of a sudden, and the gate simply fell apart and collapsed. Fan-fucking-tastic. Before I continue, my name and rank is Sergeant Naruto Uzumaki, call sign Maelstrom of the 22nd SAS Regiment. Now you may be wondering why a Japanese like me would be in the SAS. Well, to answer that, I am part English on my mom's side of the family, but she is born in England and raised in Japanese, while my father was fully Japanese. I lived over in the UK with my adoptive foster parent, who was high up in the regiment over in the UK, and he is born as a natural British man, so I got in easier that way. Believe it or not, normally it would be very difficult or impossible. I was in the regiment and in the UK just to get away from home mostly, so I lived in the UK since I was 15 years of age with my foster father, and then later I signed myself up for the military. Because I proved myself to be fully capable of pushing further on, my foster father, Captain John Price, then signed me up for the SAS because he believed I could handle the extra strain despite my younger 17-year-old body at the time. The officers were skeptical at first, but then later they were convinced till I blitzed the selection process trials over in the Brecon Beacons with all of the grueling marches over the steep hills and cold weather for over 40 miles while carrying a 60-pound Bergen rucksack carrying all of my equipment and stuff. Next was the jungle phase of training that took place in the jungles of Belize over in Central America, where I had to live there for weeks in simulated enemy territory while keeping myself and my equipment in good condition. Then came the escape and evade capture training, where I was given barely anything but an old vintage WW2 code and then given minimal instructions to reach the waypoints scattered throughout the countryside without getting captured. Despite my hard effort in evading capture, I still went through the interrogation phase, where even though they were just acting and it was all a simulation, it still felt real. They would try to be friendly at first and try and lure you into a conversation where you could eventually slip up and mention the information they're looking for. Then if you proved to be more persistent than their expectations long enough, they turned towards the aggressive approach and shout out derogatory remarks about me and my family, but mostly about my mother. At that point I had almost failed because I still held an emotional attachment to my family despite me leaving them, well, mostly my mother and sisters. My mother was partially to blame for me leaving, but she never meant it and would in due time would earn my forgiveness. My sisters were not to blame as they still loved me as their precious Ni-chan, but they were still affected by the ignorance that involved in my upbringing in the Namikaze household. My brother Menma was an ignorant fool as well as an arrogant bastard who never deserved the title of heir to the Namikaze's own company. It was always about him. My parents have been doting on their eldest son to take over the company someday, along with my sisters to take over the Uzumaki branch company Uzu Corporations, which was systematically larger than the Namikaze's own company, since the Uzumaki clan were a sister clan to the Senju, but due to a shortage in numbers they had to merge clans, which made them even stronger. But the Namikaze clan was just one man who was orphaned at a young age, who happened to be a genius and was adopted by my perverted godfather, who is a very successful author in adult literature that had earned him millions and supported Minato into his rise to fame and success. While he was good at what he does, but that's just that, he wasn't a good father. To him his company and country came first, but where did family come into the equation? Technically my family is involved, but mostly it was raising a suitable heir to the company and all that shit. Minato focused on Menma the most, while my mother Kushina focused on the twin sisters. To be honest, they were both a good choice as heiresses to the Uzu Corp. I will admit, neither one has no fatal flaws that could say otherwise. While Uzu Corp was technically larger than the Namikaze's company, the people of Japan treated my father as if he was royalty and they loved him, and my brother as if they were king and prince. But I was left with nothing, no inheritance, no support in what I wanted to do, not a fucking thing that could help me with my life. That's where I chose to leave, as it had all gotten too much to bear with the constant disregarding of my existence. So I fled to the UK, somewhere in England, so I could start anew. There I had met Price, who then took me in as his own son and taught me all I knew. Naturally my mother and sisters were devastated that I had fled from home and the country, and they were heartbroken from it and had cried their hearts out for days, begging for forgiveness. At least they tried to earn my forgiveness, but I don't think they will ever have the chance to do so now. My brother, the prick that he is, I doubt he even cared, because in all honesty he can go stick his stupid head in a lit furnace and I'll watch him melt his own face off. He was too stuck up and selfish for his own good that it was sickening to an Uchiha level. Minato now decided that he cared, but only because he would lose face from the company, and tried to bring me back at all costs. He tried to bring me back through the legal means, but I assured that it would not work because I had then legally changed my name over to Uzumaki and then moved and became a citizen of the UK and the EU, so I had luckily escaped that one for the time being. But I knew that he would definitely try again, and this time use more underhanded methods of bringing me back, like that one time back in Heathrow Airport. He wouldn't care if I hated him more than I already did, only to prevent me from running again and in his mind bring shame to his family name. Yeah, I like to see you try now, asshole, because you're all the way over there, while I'm here trapped in a strange place that I have no fucking clue of where I am. Naruto scowled to himself as he glared at the broken gate. He wouldn't be able to find information about me anyway, considering I am an unknown SAS elite commando. Anyway, after the third test of where I was tortured through the less physical and more psychological means like the stress positions and the waterboarding exercises. Man, did I hate the waterboard exercise. Stress positions is where you put a prisoner against a wall with their legs bent and their hands restricted, and they are not allowed to move from their position despite how much pain you are getting from the sore achiness of your joints and muscles. And waterboarding is where you either put a rag or a towel in someone's face and then to proceed to pour water over the towel, cutting off the victim's air supply. This gives the victim the sneeze of drowning. I thought that it was over, but Price decided to add an extra training where he took me to Mount Everest for mountaineering training, and after that I was made to learn maritime combat like in the Navy SEALs and the SBS, Special Boat Service. Except he mixed in both training regimes. Then there was Arctic training over in Siberia and desert training in the Nevada desert. All of that I had to do in 1 year and 3 months. Hard? Definitely. Impossible? Depends who you're asking. Doable. Why do you think I'm in the SAS to begin with, and how I got into this situation? I was told to investigate this anomaly located somewhere in the Scottish mountains, somewhere in a cave that was carved out to fit this massive structure inside. The gate thing was ancient and corroded with erosion by nature to the structure. Despite its age, there was energy emitting from the gate that was still running. We sent a small quadcopter drone through the gate to investigate on what's on the other side, and minutes later reported that it was clear to go through. I volunteered to check out the other side first as a precaution, along with 2 others who sadly didn't make it in case something goes wrong. And as we were about to reach the other end of the portal, we was forcibly pushed out of the portal by an unseen force against my back, and we crashed into the cave wall that was on the other end of the gate, and I was knocked unconscious. Till I came round to my senses, I realized that the gate's connection to my world had been cut off. And I was trapped in unknown territory. And my 2 other teammates had died from the impact as they both landed wrong. One was new, same as me, and the other was an officer. Both necks have been dislocated from the impact. Poor sods, I could really do with some of their help. And that's the story of my life so far. Now I have to find my way out of this cave and find out where the hell I'm at. Luckily we came through with most of our equipment. All of them were the important stuff that we needed in a close-quarter combat to long-range engagements. I have packed my L85A2 with an 4x ACOG scope with a reflex sight fixed on top of the scope and an underbarrel HKAG 3640mm grenade launcher. A Mossberg 590 shotgun as a secondary with a bungee sling. The Sig Sauer P226 is my sidearm with the suppressor and mounted laser pointer, and 3 knives such as a kukri machete, a Sykes knife for multi-purpose and whatnot, and a survivor hunting knife with the serrated edges, and a tomahawk for CQC or wood cutting. While we were in the mountains over in Scotland, we didn't have time to switch BDUs due to the urgency in this particular mission to switch from our black kit into our disruptive pattern material or DPM camo BDUs that would be suited for the terrain. While there were no forests in the mountains and it was on home ground, so we thought it wouldn't be a problem. So I packed the BDUs into my Bergen. The other 2 had their weapons, ammunition and equipment with them, which was fortunate for me as I would have plenty of supplies to last me for a good long while. Didn't want to leave valuable equipment behind for someone else to find, so I took what I could find. What the new guy had with him was what I found essential in dark places such as this place, and one of my absolute favorite submachine guns. An MP5 with a torch handguard and a retractable stock, but no reflex or holographic sights, but that's okay. It was only a standard MP5, not the built-in suppressor variant, but I was okay with that. He had the same pistol as me, so keep that one for spares and the extra magazines. He also seemed to have borrowed a unique sledgehammer called the caber hammer or a tactical breaching hammer from one of the operators, Sledge I think he was called. Well, mostly I guessed it was his if the sign written in bold on the side of his hammer, property of Sledge, gave it away. On the top was a very sturdy and strong forged head fixed on the top that can deal maximum damage with minimal slip on the target area. The handle was made from molded fiberglass that creates a strong grip that greatly reduces slip when swinging and hitting. And at the pommel end of the hammer was a forged crowbar. All in all, it was a very good hammer to ignore and it could prove very useful. The officer had with him was more for a sharpshooter loadout such as a HK-417 loaded with a 20-round 7.62mm magazine in 20-inch barrel, collapsible bipod, attachable suppressor and a scope for medium and long-range engagements along with a spare scope with night vision capabilities. They both had their water canteens filled up recently, so I took the extra water. Food is mostly ration packs and they were already in the Bergen, but the problem is that I don't have any tools to cook them with, only a Flippo lighter with spare lighter fuel and 4 boxes of matches. Grenades-wise I was sorted. Plenty of frags and flashbangs, some smoke and C4 explosives, emergency flares for immediate extraction that lasts for ages, which was quite useless for the extraction part, but in dark places such as this it was quite useful. And I was also given a type of gas given to me by Smoke. It's like CS gas but a deadly version of it. What's in it? He said it's best if I didn't know. I wonder how secure my respirator is. I still had my mountaineering equipment such as a grappling hook, Far Cry 4, with a strong rope attached to it, a carabiner clip, a full body harness that was custom made for the black kit and a petzl to allow me to operate hands-free while I am hanging from the rope and I have to engage hostiles while I am hanging from a rope. Ice picks? Maybe useful, so I will take them anyway. I had the standard issue S10 respirator gas mask with filter lenses to protect my eyes from bright flashes from a flashbang or brightly lit areas and spare oxygen filter canisters to keep out smoke and harmful gases I have salvaged from my teammates' equipment. Okay, check that as I am currently wearing it with the hood over my head and mask. Black flame retardant bodysuit with hood and thin lightweight and flexible gloves with Kevlar knuckle caps and a balaclava with no mouth hole with a skeleton jaw neckwarmer ghost mask that had been gift from Ghost, cheers man. Kevlar body armor complete with knee, elbow and shin pads, never leave without it. And the best part about them is that they are non-restrictive, almost. I still have my favorite PDA that looks like a militarized iPhone 6, Samsung Galaxy S6, only it is solar rechargeable, awesome but no internet. Crap. Ah well, I can still listen to music and do other shit I can do with it like record my findings. Tactical vest and my tactical all-terrain boots, Weapon cleaning kit, don't want no weapon jams, no excuses, just clean it. And conveniently the mini drone was still here, so could possibly connect to it and use it for my own uses. All of this including my black kit with body armor minus the Kevlar helmet and a Bergen that was luckily with me. This could prove really troublesome to haul such weight around the place. The fortunate and unfortunate is that most of my equipment such as cooking utensils and camping equipment was all set up back on the other side of the gate. I still had my rations and water, which was lucky. I kept the 3-throat 2-way radios, but I wouldn't be using the anytime soon. So pretty much all that was in my Bergen was food, water, tools, weapons and ammunition. There may come a time where I may have to be forced to abandon the Bergen rucksack for the mobility if I am caught in a conflict. I only took the necessary stuff like ammunition, rations and supplies and left the rest, seeing that I already have it. And I placed the bodies beside the gate. I couldn't really bury them in a cave now, could I? So sadly I have to leave them here? Looking around I noticed that the exit of the cave was caved in, so I couldn't leave through that way unless I would want to blast my way out, but I am not that suicidal. Fortunately there was a passage leading directly further and deeper into the dark cave, which I suspected wasn't. So I paid my last respects to my comrades and brother S in arms and headed off further into the tunnel or whatever the hell this place is. Making my way through the darkness with an MP5 in my hands with the flashlight on and the gas mask still being worn on my face but the oxygen canister detached and the hood still covering my blonde wild hair that I refused to cut. I realized it actually was not that difficult to haul around so much weight as I previously thought, but the feeling was still there digging into my shoulders. I still couldn't find anything noteworthy in this place apart from the gate that looked oddly Roman on both sides of the gate. Later I found inscriptions in the walls that looked strangely familiar to Latin used by the ancient Romans. But I wasn't sure as the writing was severely faded and chipped out from the erosion. Then I hit a dead end of the tunnel. Ah, bollocks, I said in frustration, but then I noticed that there was a draft coming through the walls. So pulled my sleeve up from glove-covered hand and held my wrist towards the wall and hovered over the stone wall until I felt the draft coming from small cracks in the form of a doorway. I pulled out the trusty custom sledgehammer and tapped the wall surface and heard that the wall wasn't that thick at all, and I raised the hammer and gave a mighty swing and struck the center of the wall. The hammerhead proved useful and efficient in its hits as it was designed for non-slip contact against surfaces. That way each swing will hit harder and deeper into any stone and wooden, and weak and thin metal surfaces. With the first swing I made a hole big enough to fit my head through. I peeked through and brought out my torch, flashlight, and saw that I was definitely not in a cave. In fact, it looked like a mine, if the pickaxes, wheelbarrows, mine carts and hoppers gave any indications. And the mine was huge. Like Lord of the Rings mines of Moria, huge and deep. I couldn't tell how deep it actually was. Even if I flashed my light down there or tossed a flare in there, I still couldn't get an accurate calculation. Most mines I would know are just open pits that can be seen from high above or even from space, but this one looked like it was carved out through a fucking mountain. How the hell did anyone do this? I gave a few more swings with my sledgehammer and I knocked down the wall with ease and stepped out of the tunnel. When I stepped out, I wasn't quite ready to see of what looked like an underground city built around pillars supporting the ceiling of probably an entire mountain. Play Devil May Cry 1 soundtrack castle stage. Whistle. Asterisk impressive place they got here. Could do with some skylights though and let some natural light in. I mused to myself in my inspection of the place. I looked around and saw that I was on a part of a cliff edge that was used mainly for mining. Looking over the edge was just a deep dark abyss, and most likely there would be buildings down there. Even if this place used to be a city or whatever the hell this place is, it was creeping me out with all of the darkness and everything abandoned, and an abandoned city cannot mean anything good. Although I digress, this place could also ruins, but the building looked a bit more recent, like only a few years had best, or a decade at least. I then saw an old light-up torch that used in cave exploring in somewhere like old ruins, lying on a torch stand carrying 3 more torches with it. And it was standing right next to a burnt-out fire pedestal. I grabbed a torch that still had some of its rags on, so I brought out my Flippo lighter, which I conveniently had with me. I don't smoke, it's just useful to have one. I flicked the lid off the lighter and ignited the lighter under the torch and watched the torch set alight and illuminate the area around me, covering quite a good area. Satisfied with what I had, I snapped the lighter shut and set off with a torch in my left hand and an MP5 in my right. An idea that had sparked my curiosity about how deep this hole goes, so I grabbed a flare and lit it alight and threw it down into the abyss below. After 7 seconds I heard a thud and all I could see was a small speck of red light shining in the darkness. Cammy, how deep is this place? How the hell do I get out of here? I wondered while flashing my flashlight around my area nearest to me, and I could see some stairwells leading further down into the darkness and some bridges that led to the other side and into the city. Only problem was that the bridge that connected to the city was gone and there were no other ways except going down and across to the other side's stairwell. When I looked down with my flashlight and saw the other stairwell. Well, looks like I'm going down into the darkness. Looks at the old crumbling apart stairwell with no safety handrails and look like it would collapse underneath me with one step. Asterisk, who's the idiot who designed these stairs? I sweat dropped as I took one light step on the stairwell until the edge of the stair had cracks forming and shifted slightly while rubble was crumbling off of the stairs. Nope, fuck that. I'll abseil down, I said with a shrug and shaking my head. I pulled out the grappling hook and rammed one of the hooks into a stable ledge that had good grip and was certain that it would not give way. With a nod with satisfaction, I stood over the ledge with the Bergen dangling below me by a spare rope. I had it dangling below me because I needed the space to operate the rope and the MP5 hanging from my side in a sling. The torch that I was still holding despite the difficulty of abseiling down with barely any light source, and a pistol in the holster that I could whip at any time, but that is mostly for any hostiles that show up. But in this dark environment like this abandoned ruins, what are the odds in that happening? About 2 minutes of abseiling and using up a lot of rope to get down to the bloody bottomless pit that I had myself going further into. I could not see the amount of rope I had left to abseil, and I could only see the light of the flare getting closer, but I felt that it was only halfway. While paying attention to the distance of the flare, I felt my right elbow hit something strong and sticky. I tried shifting my arm, but the strange substance was pulling it back. I shined my torch over my right arm and found that the sticky substance was a giant strand of web that I had gotten stuck on. Strange? This looks like a web, I mused to myself. While I was getting more curious with the web, I brought out my MP5 torch attachment and shone the light out nearby and saw what looked like a network of oversized spider webbing. And as I turned my head to the left, I came face to face with a skull wrapped in web along with its body. The skull appeared to be screaming in either agony or helplessness. He also appeared to be wearing one of those Roman cuirass's armor. What the hell? No, spider's web is not that strong to support a human body, nor is it strong enough to haul such weight around, I said, bewildered at the sight. I even noticed that there were bodies around that looked more recent, like only a few months, or one that looked like he had been killed today, with a look of pure agony, like something was burning him on the inside. Moreover, I was getting bad vibes about my current situation here. I feeling that I was in such a bad spot right now and I should get to the bottom, now. As if a sixth sense had been ringing in my head, I suddenly over to the right to dodge an incoming stinger that plunged into the cliff face from what looked like a— oh shit, that is a giant spider, and that wasn't a stinger, it was its leg that looked like it would penetrate through 3 or more different guys in one stab. From one look it had spindly legs, multiple eyes, and venomous chelicerae and a bulbous abdomen. And it was looking at me like I was dinner. First I was sent through a gate that suddenly cut off the connection to my home, trapping me here in this mining city under a mountain, and now I am trapped in a web with a spider planning to eat me. How time flies. Ha, get it? The spider screeched at me, preparing for its attack. I am so asking for a pay rise if by the time I get back home. I shouted in annoyance as I prepped up the MP5 by switching off the safety and slamming on the receiver ready and loaded. Come on in, see Winsy Spider. Cuz here comes the maelstrom to wash the spider out with bullets. I smirked behind the gas mask. It gave another screech as it charged across the web, raising its large body up and bring down 2 long legs to stab me. Play Cell Dweller. Switchback, Detroit 2000. In a nick of time I swung to left this time to avoid the 2 long legs, and I locked the pencil scroll in place so I could operate hands-free. I had a bit of trouble because I had awkwardly placed the torch in between my legs because I needed to use my hands to operate the rope while abseiling and using my weapons. While the spider was distracted, I fired into its abdomen, wounding it severely, and the spider shrieked in pain but quickly ignored the pain because of its increasing anger and continued to try and tear me off the rope. I didn't give it a chance to come closer as I gave it a short burst, illuminating the darkness around me in bright flashes while the bullets peppered its face with multiple holes and tearing a few chunks of its head off as it collapsed lifelessly into the abyss. I heard another spider crawling up the wall underneath me, so before it could get the jump on me, I jumped back and the spider missed me when it charged. The spider now confused at what happened to its prey until it felt that something land on its head. It looked up with its 8 eyes, and all of them were staring down the barrel of a HK-MP5. Rat-a-tat-ta. The submachine gun roared as it blasted out a barrage of 9mm bullets into the spider's many eyes and into its head. The spider fell lifelessly into the abyss, and I landed safely with my feet on the wall. Another spider had appeared in my line of sight slightly to the right as the light of the torch had reflected off of its eyes that gave his position away, and I swung around and opened fired on the spider's position that was creeping along a web that was leading straight towards me. The bullets tore through his face and killed it instantly. I gave a short breath of relief, but as I was about to take out the now empty clip out of the MP5, my guard had slipped slightly as another spider had appeared out of nowhere, which surprised me all of a sudden as I did not hear him coming despite its large size, and it had knocked me into the cliff face wall, knocking the empty clip out of my hand and pinned me to the wall. It constantly tried to bite a chunk out of my head or shoulder with its large venomous appendages near its mouth that also had sharp fangs for teeth. I held a firm grip on the arachne's chelicerae fangs as it tried to pierce me, but I kept on pushing the spider back with all of the strength my trained body could give me. Despite its size, I managed to hold it back for quite long while I was also using my legs to push that massive face away from me. It had gotten quite close to my face and I had a good view of its mouth as it hissed at me and spat at me straight into my gas mask. Lovely. Deciding that I had enough it invading my space, I pulled out my tomahawk and struck it straight into one of its eyes with the pointed bit of the tomahawk. The spider recoiled and pulled back, lifting me up with him as I still had a firm grip on the axe, flipping me over onto the spider. Luckily the torch had landed with me on the spider's back, singeing its carapace. I recovered my footing and balance on the spider and I gave the tomahawk twist, bringing more agonizing pain for the giant spider as it had its mouth wide open. I brought out a frag grenade and pulled out the pin and quickly threw it into his mouth, only for it to swallow the grenade just before it could recover and attempt to throw me off of its back. Then I grabbed the torch and petzl, setting it to release, and jumped of the spider before its head exploded in a shower of arachne spider gore. I quickly locked the petzl before I abseiled down too fast. The held firm grip on the rope and I felt my body lurch from the sudden pull of my harness. I was safe for now, but the problem was that I was swinging around uncontrollably and too fast, which could potentially dislodge the grappling hook from way up there. Song end. Soon I collided into something that acted as an air brake that stopped me from swinging around. Oof, I said as I felt myself winded by the sudden impact and felt that my face gas mask had landed into something soft and squishy. I noticed that I had stopped frantically swinging around like fucking Tarzan. But I am stuck to something that looks like a web cocoon and I am having difficulty getting out of the web. I had to give them credit in making something so incredibly annoying. It's like a child with its feet trapped in deep mud. And as I shifted my left hand next to my face in attempt to push myself off of the web-like cocoon, I swore I heard a moan when I was pushing. Getting confused by the sudden moan, I gave another push and I freed my head, but I heard the moan again. This time it was louder. I was now really confused until a sudden realization popped into my mind. Wait a minute. Soft and squishy, that could only mean squeeze, neon. The same voice moaned again and led me to face fault. That sounded human. Deciding to not waste time, I pulled out a Sykes knife out of the holster on my forearm and cutting through the web. While the web was strong enough to hold a spider, it was surprisingly easy to cut through at first, but the sticky residue of the web was covering up the blade and I had to clean it off so it wouldn't interfere with the knife's cutting. At last I cut through a quarter of the web off of one side of the cocoon and grabbing a handful of the web I tore it off, and what came next almost made my nose exploded in a shower of blood inside my mask. 2 exposed F-cup and glorious T. I mean S that were fully tanned but exposed. Until I felt a chill go down my spine when looked up and straight into an eye of a woman who was silently staring at me in an unnerving promise of pain and torture. Her tanned face was calm and stoic like that of a warrior, but I could tell that she was not happy by the look in her piercing ruby-colored eyes or eye, as her right eye was covered by a white eye patch and the small blush forming on her face. I could see that some of her hair was silver, but most of it was covered by web, so I couldn't tell how much hair she had. And she had it on her left cheek trailing down to her jaw. Oh shit, someone's still alive in there. And I accidentally fondled her. Crap, she looks like she wants to murder me. Quick, say something that will diffuse this situation. I mentally yelled comically. How's it hanging? I said casually. Really? Out of all things to say to calm her down, why did I pick that? Her reaction was blank as she raised her eyebrow in slight confusion to what I said. She continued to stare at me until she looked around and noticed that she was hanging from a web and gave out an analysis of the situation. Oh, we appear to be hanging from a web. That is actually as troublesome. It worked? That old pun actually worked. No, it probably didn't, because I think she didn't understand what I was saying, but I most definitely understood what she said right there. That is almost unmistakably Latin, but with some differences. I heard loud noises above us. I assume that was you? She asked me. Okay, I understood that, but how do I speak it? I know Latin sort of, but who the fuck speaks it in the 21st century? No one. Fuck it, I'll go with the flow. Yes, that was me up there with the giant spiders. Did you have to make so much noise? Whatever you did up there could be heard from leagues away. I am surprised that it didn't attract every monster in this mine. Phew, safe. I exhaled slightly under my breath inside the mask. So I'm not alone in this mine, mountain, or whatever this place is called. You don't know about this place? She tilted her head and lifting up an eyebrow. I shook my head in denial. This mining city used to be a great dwarf city of Khazad Ladar, made it up using Khazad from the Lotr Khazad Dum and the Fantasy City generator. But over a century ago this city fell to an unlikely alliance of spiders, goblins and even orcs and even aggressive mountain trolls that invaded the city and slaughtered the defenders and driving out the inhabitants, leaving them without a home. The Empire however heard about this and turned their backs on the Dwarven Kingdom. They were more interested in the riches within the kingdom than the people within the city, so tried to conquer the city for themselves. But ultimately it ended in failure. They were in unknown territory and fighting in the darkness that gave the monsters the advantage they took to slaughter the soldiers. The campaign ended in disaster and the general who led it was executed for his disgraceful failure. After that the city laid here forgotten and abandoned, used as nests for these savage monsters. However, that didn't deter everyone from entering this place. Once the stories were told about the Dwarven city's riches and treasure, precious gems and gold and even rare metal ores, a great number of people jumped at the chance to gain the riches for themselves. Most of them were adventurers who were overly and confident and ignorant of the place's dangers within because they didn't research well enough. Or even mercenaries hired by the greedy nobles of the empire or other kingdoms who had the knowledge to know about the place, but THWE nobles didn't give them the accurate information or didn't share any of the knowledge about the dangers with the mercenaries at all, and that misinformation inevitably killed them. She explained, "Wait, dwarves? And did she say goblins, orcs and even trolls? Not only that, but she said nobles, as in aristocracy? Where the fuck am I?" I yelled in frustration in my head. "So are you one of these adventurers or mercenaries? I guess you could call me an adventurer, but I didn't come here for the treasure. We have our reasons for coming here." "Who's we?" Suddenly her eyes lit up in a slight panic. "Oh no, Cathal," she shouted behind her. "Who?" "My partner, she is on the other side of me, and she's been bit not long ago. And she's passed out." "How long has it been since she was bit?" "Mountain spider's venom is slow acting, only taking effect in 20 minutes. So we have 18 minutes to get her down, which is going to be tricky." I sighed. "I severely doubt the rope or even the hook will hold." Suddenly I felt a jerk on the rope pulling my harness and slightly lifting me up. And then I felt myself drop with nothing holding me. And then I saw that the rope was falling and then the hook falling past my view. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," I said in frustration as I mechanically winded up the rope with a device that was hooked to the back of the harness until the hook reached the base. The hydraulic hook and rope that was new tech that was designed to abseil down anything and be able to extract the rope quickly and without the hassle of doing it manually. "What's happened?" "Those bastard spiders dislodged the hook that was holding me up against the cliff safely. Now I have lost my support that's holding me up safely. And now the only thing that is holding me up is this web and you." She blushed as she noticed the close proximity between the two of us, with our chests pushed up against each other and with my right hand holding onto her exposed shoulder that was near her exposed chest and my left hand carrying the torch that was the main source of light to see around, and her hands were constricted by the web. It also didn't help that my pelvis was so close to hers, and I hope she is wearing something under that web, otherwise I would die in embarrassment or shame, maybe both. Then suddenly I felt the web drop suddenly as if it was collapsing. Then it dropped again. This time I heard a snapping sound. "Over there," she said, looking at the direction where the sound came from. I brought up my MP5 and shone the torch in the direction of the web until I saw one bloody spider that had been really sneaky and crept up on us, and instead of attacking, he decided to cut off the web that was supporting me and the two trapped in a web. "Those crafty 8-legged shit stains," I said mentally in my head. I saw one of its leg hovering over a large strand of web and was getting near the thread of web in preparation to cut it whilst it was staring at me. "No," I told the spider. The spider continued to stare blankly at me and its leg got even closer. "No, no, no. Don't even think about doing it," I warned it. The spider ignored me and was now grazing the web ever so slightly. Now, Mr. Spider, don't make me shoot you tilde," I said in a sing-song voice while pulling out my MP5 and pointed it at the spider to intimidate it. The spider must be intelligent enough to understand what happened to its brethren. But this spider apparently wasn't, as it continued to ignore me and was now starting to cut into the web. "Suit yourself." I shrugged and pulled the trigger until click. I said in confusion, until to my horror and face fault behind the mask as I made a realization. "Where is the ammo clip?" I muttered in my mind as I noticed an outline of what was supposed to be an ammo clip secured into the gun and was supposed to loaded. Until I rewinded back a few minutes ago when I was battling the spider and one of them had crept up on me and Ah! I looked down into the abyss and mentally shouted in my head, "That ugly fuck knocked it out of my hand." Now I was staring blankly at my gun and disbelief behind the mask was etched onto my face. Not one has this critical rookie mistake had never ever happened before and would never be tolerated in the regiment. If the guys heard this they would never let me live it down. I looked back to the spider only to see it give out an 8-eye smile and a spider equivalent of a savage grin as it had already cut through the web and was now holding us by a thread and then let go of it, sending us down into the abyss. Fu. Kya. We both screamed as we both fell into the darkness down below. They say that life flashes before your eyes the second before you die, where life had almost hit me in the face, literally. For a brief moment I felt a small stretch of memories hitting me, reminding me of all the moments I had experienced in my stupid life. My childhood, my preteens, then coming up to my late teens. Showing nearly everything I have had to suffer to get to this point of where I am at now, only for the memories to fast forward straight to the present as my death was denied. But in that small moment I had remembered a few memories of the happiest moments in my life. My 5th birthday, of where I first remembered spending the time with my mother and 2 sisters, Mito and Naruto. Minato and Menma were not present as one had work at the company and the other didn't care as he spent his time with his friends. But it didn't matter to me. Somehow I knew they still cared. They were just misguided, and that memory had shown me proof of that I had remnants of what was left of my family, to be put back together again. The second memory was with my foster father Price and the lads from the regiment back in Hereford. I was 17 at the time of my graduation and I was the youngest recruit they had, so the lads had to throw a party for me for that. Macmillan, Soap, Ghost, Gaz, Roach, Nikolai, everyone, they were just a blast to have around. And the third memory was where I was transferred to join the counter-terrorism unit Rainbow 6 that had been reactivated due to some incidents. I was nominated to go along with 4 others from either the same regiments or from somewhere else. We were picked due to our specialties in attacking and defending roles. I was partnered up with another old-timer like Price and Macmillan, but equally as dangerous as them. He goes by the alias Thatcher, and like Price and Macmillan he also participated in several notorious operations and was a veteran of 3 wars. He saw action at the Battle of Goose Green during the Falklands conflict, participated in Operation Nimrod of the Iranian Embassy siege as a part of Team Blue in 1980, and was also assigned to Unit Bravo 20 of the SAS during the Gulf War in 1991. Pretty impressive, I do say so myself. Thatcher specializes in anti-electronic warfare with his state-of-the-art EMP grenades that will knock out any electronic gadget or plug within a specific radius, and in an instant it sends out 12,500 volts per meter. Next was Sledge, to which I now currently have his hammer that had previously been borrowed by my dead teammate who was named Lloyd. The officer I was with, whose name was Holt, had also borrowed a few special gas grenades from another fellow operator, Smoke. Sledge specializes in breaching with his hammer as he was known for his strength, while Smoke was a defensive operator that uses his specially made noxious gas. And finally there was Mute. Well, he pretty much lives up to his name alright. The guy barely talks and only does so when necessary. Mute had also developed his own piece of tech that is designed to knock out or jam radar signals and bomb charges, all of that in one portable box. The team I was transferred to were geniuses in their own rights, through experience, through years of service, along with knowledge in other respected fields. The other teams of similar counter-terrorism units were selected through those reasons alone. The third memory was with me and everyone in Team Rainbow. Granted, they didn't think much of me at first and wrote me off as a green newbie, the recruit. But I soon proved them wrong, where I saved their asses multiple times. Those were the last memories I had experienced before I was forcibly pushed back into reality. I opened my eyes as I was brought out of my short unconsciousness, and I blinked from the surprise to see that I was still alive and I hadn't met a gruesome death. Okay, talk about cutting it close. I mentally sweat dropped as my face was staring at the floor about a meter away from my face. After the spider had dropped us down into the pitch black darkness mining trench with me and the 2 trapped females, at least I assume the other one is a female? That nerve-tormenting experience of free falling without any safety ropes or parachutes, I really thought that this was it. But luckily for us, and unfortunately for that bastard spider way up there along with the other spiders, they have unwittingly threaded so much web down in the trench that the further we fell down the more web we had been caught in, further decreasing our dropping speed. The webs still tore off from the wall, but it was enough for us to slow down to reach the bottom with a small thud on against my face. Ha ha ha. Thought you had the last laugh, didn't ya, bitch? I've had people trying and failing to kill me for years, but kudos to you as you came pretty close along with a few others. I said mockingly while looking up where the spider was way above us, but it couldn't hear me, so I settled for flipping the birdies at it. This is not the time to be mocking the spider. My partner will not last much longer, you must help her. The silver, snow-white woman said sternly at me as if she wasn't affected by the near-death experience, but I could tell she still was. She was just good at hiding it. Alright, but do you want me cut you free first so you could help? Would take too long to cut through the web. Forget about me and focus on her. Fair enough. I shrugged and got to cutting with my stronger and sharper hunting knife that I thought would be better in this situation with the serrated blade, and cut myself loose first and turned the cocoon over and saw an outline of a large humanoid figure. She did say her partner was a she, right? Looks a bit too large to be an average female. I analyzed. Oh well, less thinking, commence cutting. I cut around the outline and then began to peel off the web on the top half, and what was revealed was quite a shocker. Scratch that, it made me doubt my ever-dwindling faith in realism. This place was messing with my head, that's for sure. Are those horns on her head? What are you waiting for? She is turning pale, stop gawking and help her already. The silver-haired woman who was peeking over the shoulder on the other side of the web cocoon. Oh crap, sorry. I quickly snapped out of my stupor and immediately went to work. You said she was bitten, right? She nodded. A spider managed to punch through her plate with one of its fangs. So I doubt that her wound was deep, but the venom still got into her wound. I know it didn't inject much into her, but even the smallest amount can still kill her, but it is more slower depending on the amount of venom was injected into you. She explained. Right, I know exactly what to do. Now that I know it is venom related. And, wait, did you say plate? Yes. I looked over to her plate and saw that she was wearing a leather type of plate that was styled in a weaved over pattern. It was done quite well, to be honest, and I saw what happened to be the hole that was mentioned right where her left is. Ah, shit. What kind of cruel and benevolent god would throw me into this kind of situation? I've never had a good experience with female contact for years. Well, I digress. Back in the academy in Japan, there was just a lack of good females. Quite a lot did really like to grate on my nerves. After that I went back and forth into the field and into the counter-terrorism unit, where I was selected for the United Nations International Counter-Terrorism Program Rainbow Six, led by this unknown woman who is simply known as Six, that had reactivated the program due to the recent and sudden increase in terrorist attacks around the world. One of these groups was this so-called ISIS or Islamic State that had risen up into power recently in Syria and Iraq, that had been one of the big contenders and is increasing in power only in vast numbers. Then there were these unknown terrorist organization known as the White Masks. Not much information was known about them as of yet. Then there were these rumors going on back in Japan that another group had been on the rise. Namely, the Yakuzas were getting quite restless lately and were giving the Japanese authorities a hard time, and Japan's SAT, Special Assault Team, had to be called in to handle these situations. Then there were some shadowy rumors going on that were being looked into. I have met a few women overseas that were operators same as me that I worked alongside with. There was Eliza Cohen aka Ash in America's FBI SWAT, who was originally born in Israel but transferred over to FBI, bringing her knowledge of demolitions along with her trusty grenade launcher loaded with a special breaching charge. Then there was Emmanuelle Pichon aka Twitch of the French counter-terrorism unit GIGN, National Gendarmerie Intervention Group. Her specialty was her custom-made drones that far outperformed the civilian and military-provided variants. Then we got to Germany's GSG-9 unit, Border Protection Group 9, where they have Monica Weiss aka IQ. IQ was like Twitch in a way where she is also pioneer, and she had designed her own prototype that is the Red MKI while she was a PhD candidate at Caltech. That device of hers allows her to track down electronics like mines, C4, tripwires, IEDs and all sorts of nasty things that has a wire or runs wirelessly. And last was the recent addition to the team that was transferred from the Canadian JTF-2, Joint Task Force 2, whose was known as Frost. Didn't get her name though, unfortunately. Her specialty was laying out traps like the one she made out of a bear trap that she nicknamed the Welcome Mat. They were perhaps the best and most interesting women I have ever met. Back on Earth, Team Rainbow's secret headquarters. Achoo. 4 female operators sneezed simultaneously. That was weird, said a puzzled Ash. Yeah, indeed, said IQ, who was just as puzzled as her teammate. I think this is what's known as in Japanese anime, manga logic, that somebody must be thinking or talking about us, explained Twitch, cupping her own chin. If that's true, I hope it's Naruto, said the newest operator, Frost. After Frost said that, all women blushed when that name was mentioned, as if it was taboo, but in a god way. Frost, you have barely known him for 2 months. How could he have such an impact on your life that quickly? Ash said to her Canadian teammate with a raised brow. Wasn't it the same with you? In fact, you warmed up to him much more quicker than Frost did. Q pointed out suspiciously. And it was just under a month, added Twitch, who the both of them had known Ash the longest. Ash immediately blushed at the memories that had happened with her experiences with Naruto. Shut up. Okay, maybe I do like the kid, as he has proved my opinion of him wrong, and that he was so much more. I can remember that I was being quite harsh to him at first just because of his age. We were all like that at first. Even I had my first share of ridicule when I first joined the Gigan, which made me into a bit of a hypocrite. And what do you mean you like Naruto? And don't kid yourself out of this, I know which way it was meant for, said a now stern Twitch, who noticed her behavior pattern. Ash was scratching the back of her head sheepishly and laughing nervously. Why so serious all of a sudden? It's as if you have a crush on him. Q said to Twitch, to which she had a small but noticeable blush that didn't escape the German operator's eye. Oh, don't tell me. Alright, I will admit it. I am in love with him, okay. Twitch was now a bit irate that she had to admit it out loud. You too, yelled the 3 women, only to suddenly look at each other and noticed that IQ had suspiciously joined in on the matter. Monica, you like him as well? Yeah, it's true. IQ sighed, not bothering to hide it. But you're nearly 30. Hey, I have needs too, you know. And I'm not that older than the rest of you, I'm 27, where some of you is 22 to 25, countered IQ. Would you look at that? We certainly have gotten ourselves in a predicament, chuckled Frost at the irony. We all have feelings for our favorite blonde, replied a sighing Twitch. Who would have thought? Agreed Ash. Well, what now? IQ voicing out the thoughts of the other 3 operators. I suppose we could confess to him, mused Frost. All 4 of us? And how well is he going to take that? Q raised an eyebrow at that idea. Outside of the room was Thatcher and Mute, listening in on the conversation, or bickering as they called it. Thatcher was chuckling in amusement. That bloody foxy lad, I tell ya. He always has the knack of surprising all of us, and especially at attracting the strongest people to him. Even those 4 have managed to find love, especially in this type of work where it is very brutal at times. Goes to show that you can find love in the strangest of paces, commented Thatcher. Mute nodded and turned to Thatcher. Do we tell them? They deserve to know, as with the rest of the lads in the team. Thatcher sighed. He was our good friend Mute, to all of us. Such a damn shame, he was such a good lad, he didn't deserve that fate. I doubt he is gone, Mute said monotonously. As you said, he always surprises us with his unpredictable nature. In due time he may do something we will least expect. Che, you got that right, and by the way, that's the first time I heard you speak longer than a full sentence, chuckled Thatcher. Mute turned his head away. Don't get used to it. Thatcher chuckled at his response and turned towards his right and saw one of his teammates sledge on the floor, drawing imaginary circles, muttering about his precious hammer. Oh, suck it up, Sledge, it's not the end of the world. That was my favorite hammer. Why the hell did I let that twat Lloyd borrow it? Now he's gone and lost it, and fuck knows where that's gone, grumbled Sledge, like he had been robbed of his favorite toy. Why can't you get another one then? Said a now present Smoke. Unlike you, Thatcher and Mute, my tool was one of a kind, that I had it custom made out of my own money, and the materials to make it were expensive. Whilst your equipment you can simply make more. Don't you have spares? I do, but that was my first and favorite hammer. Bloody hell, mate, you act like you sleep with the hammer in bed at night. I actually do. Christ Sake's Sledge, do you care more for your sodding hammer than the lad Naruto? Don't misunderstand, I do care for him, I really do. In fact, I'd trust him a hell of a lot more with my hammer than that. Good enough, now we need to tell the team. Wasn't this supposed to be a secret? Asked Smoke. We're his mates, Smoke, brothers and sisters in arms, whatever you want to call it. The bond we shared together should never be underestimated. Soap understands this too, said Thatcher. Couldn't agree more, old man. Smoke and Mute nodded. Thatcher chuckled and went off to tell the team the news. "My hammer," muttered Sledge, only to get a smack on the back of the head by Thatcher. "Pack it in, Sledge, we gotta go and tell M." "Alright, I'm coming." He got up and followed as they all went in to stop a possible fight and turn it into something more meaningful where they would come to an understanding or escalate the situation into something worse with his absence in the world. Cut back to Naruto. "Ha, good times it was with Team Rainbow. I'm going to miss those lads in my regiment and those guys from Team Rainbow." Pretty much they were the only female contact that had been good so far. Granted, the reception was not good at first, but it eventually settled down and we got along just fine like a house on fire. And that was after I had joined the SAS. Before it had been pretty bad. Before I was 15, the school academy was a hellhole. It was voted as one of the best academies around in Japan, but once you really see it on the inside, it was the devil's play school. The teachers were good at teaching, but they were corrupted like that of a politician in parliament. They can screw you over if you happen to look at them funny or disagree with them. The academy was riddled with bullies who prey on the weak to certify their own egos. The popular boys and girls flaunt their statuses around that I couldn't give a fuck about. So I was more of an outcast in that place, but I couldn't care less about them. To hell with them. But even after all who made me suffer, there was only one person who didn't. This girl, Hinata Hyuga. She was, well, odd. She was not how I expected her to be, with her being an heiress to the Hyuga name. I expected her to be more like most Hyugas and snuff me down like I was an insignificant piece of dirt underneath their shoes. Yet she didn't. In fact, she was the kindest and innocent-looking girl I had ever met, even more surprisingly that she was a Hyuga. Maybe I could've. No, I can do nothing to change that. The past is behind me and my home is too far away from me to make a difference now. Focus on the now, the future and the task at hand. Speaking of the task at hand, I had unclasped her plate that seemed to be really tight around her chest area. Until I found out why. The buckles that were holding the chest piece around her chest was holding back a pair of honest-to-God Q-cup-sized S. That, and she was quite tall, to which I suspect she is around 230 centimeters or slightly taller. I pulled down my hood, unfastened my gas mask and removed it off my head, freeing my wild sun-kissed golden locks of hair that still held its natural wildness despite wearing the hood over my head. Naruto's sweat dropped at the size of this large horned girl's S, but at the same time kept up with his professional attitude on the situation. Not going to be caught off guard this time, but he did get a few light hues of red emanating off of his. Right now, where's the bite mark? After a quick search for the bite mark, it didn't take long to find it. But when Naruto found it, he instantly blushed and deadpanned with sweat drops added to it. Oh, why did it have to be there? Naruto mentally face-palmed. Third POV, Lime alert. To what he was referring about was where the bite mark was at, right next to her. Do I really have to do this? I don't know if that method works or not. Fuck it, I'll wing it and take responsibility later if this works. Naruto resolved himself and positioned himself on top of her like he was straddling her. He grasped onto her left in a firm grip. He took deep breaths and exhaled. You can do this, Naruto. No one will know of this. Just focus on her life right now, that's all that matters. He thought to himself in assurance before he lowered his mouth onto the bite mark also covering her. MMMNOO. Tilda. The horned girl known as Cathal moaned as she stirred slightly from the contact and Naruto's sucking with his powerful lungs. What Naruto was doing was actually helping her to some extent, as her breathing was almost getting weaker from the venom, but it now had stabilized, sort of. She was more taking in sharp breaths from the pleasure she was feeling, but she had no consciousness to know what's actually happening as she was still knocked out. NNGH. She moaned louder this time. The silver-haired woman heard her partner moan out but didn't know what was happening back there, so she tried to loosen the web a bit so she could shift herself so she can see what was happening behind her. After a few moments of shifting around, she looked over her partner's shoulder, and what she saw made her instantly blush and face-fault at the sight of what this handsome blonde male was doing to her partner. She couldn't find the right words to say to this man. Back with Naruto, he managed to gather some venom in his mouth and proceeded to spit it out of his mouth. WWWH, what are you doing to my teammate? She managed to find the right words this time. Naruto face-faulted at being caught red-handed but managed to hold the blush down to some degree. Okay, this is not what it looks like, I swear. This is a method in removing venom from either wounds or bites. Won't you also be affected by the venom as well? Technically no, venom and poison are two different things. Venom works by injecting itself into the bloodstream to take effect, where poison you have to either ingest or inhale it to take effect. I would be affected by the venom if I have an open cut on the inside of my mouth or my lips. Are you sure this works? She raised an eyebrow while she was still blushing at his actions as he went back to sucking the venom out of the spit. Nope, never done it before. But it does look to be working. See, her skin color's brightened up to its normal light tanned color, with a little tinge of pink on her cheeks, but I think that's down to fever. The silver-haired woman only sweat dropped at that comment. You think? She mentally deadpanned. As Naruto was sucking more venom out, he began to subconsciously massage her and caress it, getting more moans of pleasure from the unconscious Cathal. Naruto, who was unaware of what his actions was doing to her as he was getting a little too into it. Cathal's S had hardened from the stimulation and something stirred within her chest, specifically her mammary glands. And with another suck from Naruto and without warning of what came next, Cathal's S exploded as she came from her S, squirting out milk into Naruto's mouth and face. Moo! She cried out in ecstasy. Naruto resisted the urge to swallow as it could contain remnants of the spider venom and spat it straight out while coughing from the sudden milk spray. The silver-haired woman was looking at the scene with a blank face, but on the inside she was blushing up a storm and her mind had shut down temporarily. Lime end. Cough. Asterisk. Never in my life have I saved someone's own life in such a bizarre way. He mentally face-palmed. He could still taste the milk in his mouth. Tastes quite nice actually. He said to himself as he wiped the milk off of his face with high-gloved hand and sucked the milk off his fingers. Huh? Said a surprised voice below him. He then looked and deadpanned and began to sweat nervously. Crap, did I say that out loud? Cathal had awoken to a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, whiskered stranger wearing dark clothing or armor, she couldn't really tell. And she woke up to see him straddling her, and as she looked down to her bare chest she could see he had one of his hands still pressed onto her chest and they were both leaking milk. And she looked back with her blush increasing intensity as she could see milk splashed over his face and a small milk trail running out of his mouth. RRRGH, she growled. This isn't what it looks like at first, but you're welcome by the way. Naruto attempted to negotiate to her with a smile, but she didn't seem convinced at first when she saw the state he was in as her blush was flaring up furiously and her lips were trembling from barely controlled anger. Get the hell off of me, you pervert! She roared as she ripped her arm out of the web with unnatural strength and shoved me off of her in the center of my torso with her fingerless leather-gloved right palm of her hand. Thank Kami I was wearing Kevlar underneath. Well, it looked like a shove at first glance, but to me the force that I felt was like getting punched in the stomach by a heavyweight Olympian weightlifter, and that was only a shove. A punch from her would feel like? I'd rather not go there. The force from the push had launched me into another patch of web on the wall, so luckily I had a soft landing, but unluckily for me I was now stuck again, and with Cathal had freed herself with her ludicrous strength and pulled out her weapon that was a man-sized D warhammer with a spike on the tip of the hammer from the web like cocoon. When she released herself she had revealed her full height to me, and it fully explains her appearance. She stood at around about 7 feet 7 inches or 231 centimeters, so she was defiantly a big girl all right. But what caught my attention were her legs. One, they were covered in fur, and two, she had hooves instead of feet, cow-like ears and a large pair of horns on her head. She also has a tail. No, being serious, a tail. She had long black messy hair with a patch of dirty blonde hair on her fringe that was wild looking, and that she kept most of her hair in a ponytail with black and white stripes going down the length of it down to her mid-back. Under each of her eyes she has a thick black stripe marks or something like that. 2 long black bangs on each side of her face reaching down to her neck. She had bar-shaped pupils that were horizontal and her eyebrows were shaped like tick marks. She had her woven leather plate that had been taken off earlier that was more like a bra to her that protected yet supported her chest area. She also came equipped with some plated steel pauldron added onto the shoulders with an added white fur collar and leather gauntlets, leather cuisses, and lastly a black leather with added white fur and dark steel-plated tassel. She didn't have anything protecting her abdomen, as I could clearly see her lightly toned six-pack abs and slender hips that complemented her well considering her appearance of a 7 feet 7 woman. And ironically there was a cowbell attached around her neck on a choker. Naruto was suddenly brought out of his analysis as a spike that came from her warhammer had embedded into the wall beside my head as Cathal had stabbed the tip of her hammer deep into the mining trench, chasm wall with noticeable cracks forming around the hole. Naruto's sweat dropped at the sheer strength she had when wielding a man-sized warhammer effortlessly. Naruto was suddenly yanked out of the web by Cathal, who grabbed onto his collar and brought him to her face level and glared at him straight into his eyes. "Who the hell are you to do that to me whilst I was out, huh?" she demanded. "The man who just saved your life, and I can see that you're practically fine after that spider bite. You should still be weakened even after I got that venom out of you. Since when was sucking on my a method of removing venom?" she said while blushing and still felt vexed about the whole ordeal. "It is a common method where I come from, but that does not imply that you have to do that to get rid of the venom. It's where the bite was located, and your bite mark happened to be where your areola was." Naruto rolled his eyes at her comment while holding back a blush of his own. "But you didn't have to do that. Why didn't you use the anti-venom poison antidote?" she asked him. "Wait, what? The antidote? We keep them with us for situations such as coming across venomous and poisonous animals, insects and reptiles. Why didn't you use one of them instead?" "That's the first I've heard of them," I said while narrowing my eyes in the direction of the silver-haired woman who was attempting to hide herself behind the web cocoon. Unfortunately for her, Cathal had caught onto his meaning and walked over to the cocoon and ripped the silver-haired woman out of the cocoon. "Ghislaine, why didn't you tell him about the antidotes?" she yelled at her partner. The woman who was now officially been named as Ghislaine was another bizarre sight to see. While she did look remotely closer to a human, but at the same time she wasn't. When I looked at her face to face when I was, pressed against her on the cocoon, I couldn't really see her ears as they were covered by the web. If I were to guess on what animal she represents, it would most likely have something to do with a cat. I would say probably a white-furred cat, but this Ghislaine has a silver mane of hair along with the ears and she is mostly tanned. But her appearance was what got his attention. While Cathal definitely would catch the eyes of many perverted males, but this Ghislaine might as well be wearing nothing at all. She wore suspenders over her shoulders with a leather belt wrapped around her back with both ends of the belt barely covering her decency and another thin strip of belt connecting the two ends but were currently disconnected, hence why she was currently naked, but they didn't seem to notice me watching. She wore a gray shin-length form-fitting trousers, an open black leather coat with a fur collar and a pair of light brown sandals. "It didn't come to mind, I'm sorry." "Sigh, do you still have them?" "I still feel woozy. I think Akane had it last." "Okay, so where is she?" "From the looks of it, she was sandwiched *NNNGH. Between you two." Naruto had pointed out to the two while he looked inside the cocoon, and he indeed saw somebody else in there, so he ran up to her and pulled her out with a grunt. Cathal and Ghislaine felt like they had been slapped in the face by the sudden remembrance of their third teammate that they had forgotten. "Whoa, Akane." Cathal's face faltered in shock at the sight of her friend and partner Akane that had been pulled out. "I forgot she was in there with us." Ghislaine's sweat dropped and looked away in guilt. "Don't worry, she's fine, she's just passed out from lack of air. But her breathing is pretty shallow," Naruto reassured them as they exhaled in relief. "How will we wake her up?" "Well, I have another method or two, but don't worry, I won't give her CPR." "CPR?" they both said in chorus as they were both equally puzzled by the name as they both tilted their heads with a question mark above their heads. "What's that?" Kathy asked. "You don't know what it is? How can you know? You know what? Never mind." Naruto suddenly cut off as he was reminded about the possibility of him being in another world was more than likely turning true. CPR, or cardiopulmonary resuscitation, is a life-saving technique useful in many emergencies, including heart attack, near drowning or lack of air in the lungs that causes someone's breathing or heartbeat to stop. How do you do it? Two ways. One is to place the heel of your hand and place the other hand on top of that hand and put both of them on the bone at the center of the person's chest. Place your other hand on top of your first hand and interlock your fingers. And keep on adding compressions to the chest at a steady rate. And after 30 presses to the chest, you give him or her mouth to mouth. Mouth to mouth as in a. Ghislaine trailed off as the two imagined what it would look like in their heads, but for some odd reason the person they were saving was none other than Naruto. They both imagined a scene that went something like a theatrical romantic play. They never went to one, but they heard what it was like. The scene was them doing the chest compressions and calling out his name dramatically, and Naruto laid there lifeless. And then they both reached down and captured his lips passionately, and Naruto had awoken like a bad rip-off of Sleeping Beauty but reversed, saved by the demi-humans in each separate dream. And then it trailed off to something more raunchy and erotic as Naruto proposed to offer himself as gratitude to his saviors, and then the scene transitioned to a white bed that was in each other's thoughts, and sounds of rocking and moaning was present. "No, it's not what you're thinking," said a voice from outside of their daydreaming. Pop went the dream bubble, as they were both brought back to reality with bright red blushes and drool coming out of their lips, and their eyes brightened up. Naruto deadpanned at the two. "I would ask what was up with your thoughts considering the looks on your faces, but I think I will pass on that one," he said as they looked away from his gaze with bright red blushes. And no, mouth to mouth means exhaling air from your lungs into the other person's mouth and straight into his/her lungs while pinching the nose while that person is unconscious. "Oh, they both said simultaneously out of slight embarrassment. "Gah, what the hell was I thinking? Why am I having such lewd thoughts about the man who just fondled and did well that to me moments ago? Well, I would admit he is good looking even for a human. It's like looking at a high elf with that blonde hair of his. Oh gods, my chest is swelling up even from thinking about him. I knew I should have milked myself before I headed out to this stupid expedition." Cathal rubbed her head in frustration. Ghislaine, however, had a more calm look on her face, but took a few glances at Naruto with a small blush on her face. Must be the primal instincts kicking in again, she though at first, but then brushed off the thought and asked him. "And what is the other method you're suggesting?" Naruto walked up to his burgan that was stuck to the cocoon but had been separated from Cathal's shove. He took out his knife and cut the web off that was stuck to his burgan. "Give me a minute. Damn web's bloody annoying to get off, it get everywhere," Naruto muttered as he cut of the last remaining web off of his burgan. He then opened up one of his many pockets in his burgan to see if he still had his gift from Doc back in Team Rainbow 6. "Ah, here it is," he said while pulling out a tactical medical kit that can be used on the field and was filled with medical supplies that can deal with most of the wounds, illness and other things. He even had sent him a pack of his specialized epinephrine in a saline solution that he uses in his dart gun of his but was in a syringe. Naruto didn't go for the epinephrine but instead went for a small bottle and pulled the top off of it. Ghislaine could smell the salts really strongly even if she wasn't standing close to him, but she felt as if that bottle was burning her sensitive nose, but at the same time she felt her senses were really awake and aware despite the lack of sleep she had been feeling. She immediately pinched her nose and her tears were welling up around her eyes. "What is that? Smelling salts? Why, what's up with you?" Naruto asked her with a bit of concern in his voice. "I'm part cat. We have a keen sense of smell, and that bottle you have in your hand feels like my nose is burning." "Oh crap, that's right, sorry. Well, the purpose of this bottle is to arouse a person from consciousness by jump-starting his breathing pattern. What the salt's gas does is it irritates the nostril membranes and lungs, so much so that it triggers a sharp inhalation reflex, bringing in more air and thus more oxygen. This can result in improved alertness. When a person passes out, they sometimes lose consciousness due to decreased blood flow to the brain. Sniffing smelling salts can raise a person's blood pressure, heart rate, and oxygen levels, helping brain activity and reactivating the sympathetic nervous system." "Huh?" they both said, tilting their heads. Naruto sighed. "It brings people back from unconsciousness or faints and dizziness." "Oh," they both said while hitting their left in the palm of their other hand. "Why didn't you say so?" said Cathal. "I did. Apparently my explanation was too complex for you." "Are you calling me stupid?" Cathal frowned. "Never said you were. It's just that I am qualified to use medical supplies and thus I should know about this sort of thing about the human body and the effects some of the supplies would entail." "So you're a healer?" Ghislaine inquired placidly. "Not necessarily, I'm not officially a healer, but where I come from it is called medic. These are tactical medical supplies that a foot soldier may carry while they are in the heat of battle, while the field medic is right behind where he carries the most supplies around for the wounded soldiers who were brought out of battle. They are filled with supplies that either cleans up open wounds so it won't end up infected or help ease the pain during a battle so you can keep on going. I only know so much as I learned from the best, but I still have a lot of catching up to do," he explained while walking up to the third-party member. Naruto cut off the web that was covering her face and he was in for yet another surprise. Holy crap, the Otakus back in Japan will bust a nut over this shit. Naruto's eyes widened at the new silver-haired person and tanned like Ghislaine, but her ears were skinned but pointed outwards. Okay, so it's a dark elf this time. It's official, I must be tripping balls right now. Naruto stared at the dark elf in wonder. Aren't you going to help her? Ghislaine reminded him. Right. First time seeing a dark elf? Cathal inquired. Actually, it's my first time seeing both of your kinds as well. Naruto replied back honestly to both Ghislaine and Cathal. Cathal raised an eyebrow. You serious? Where have you been? Living under a rock, she said sarcastically. Hopping through gates from one world to another. Naruto replied back simply while holding the bottle under the elf's nose. What? Cathal blinked, and Ghislaine's eyes widened slightly. Gasp, gaw. She was interrupted by the dark elf's sudden gasp and launched herself up, clutching her nose in irritation. What in Hardy's name was that? It burns. She yelled out in aggravation. You're welcome. Naruto said it simply like it was no big deal. The dark elf turned around to face Naruto in a glare. Who the hell are you? The dark elf was 5 feet 4 in height and her hair was kept at neck length, swept back so the back of her head was spiky, leaving 2 strands of hair as bangs running down her face. Her body was athletic, lean and slender, with her bust size being a D cup. But her appearance had stricken me as quite odd. She liked to wear quite a lot of black, either that was a bit revealing around the cleavage and thighs, most of it is covered by a cloak, but I could see that she had a red collar around her neck. Naruto only raised an eyebrow at her tone. Well, that's not nice, considering I helped you regain consciousness in this forsaken place. Shouldn't you be more grateful? Naruto said apathetically. The elf only snorted rudely and smirked. Why should I? Do you expect me to open my legs and offer myself to you in gratitude? Naruto snorted back in distaste. No, a simple thank you would have sufficed. Don't go comparing me to some hormonal teenager desperate for some bedroom action. The elf only rolled her eyes and replied back, okay, thank you for bringing me back to consciousness. I'll owe you that much. That's all I'm asking for. Naruto nodded while packing his medical kit back inside a slot of the Bergen and secured it in place. You sure you don't want anything else with that? She said, suggested flirtatiously. Is now really the time for that? Naruto looked at her funny, to which she giggled. I'm just messing with ya. No need to be a stubborn virgin about it. Don't bring my life into this. Naruto sighed. So you admit to being a virgin? Well, it's more like I have a major lack of. How come? She inquired more. Didn't have the time for it, but I don't see how this is any of your business anyway. Oh come on, who was your first? As if I'll let you know that one. Oh come on, I'll tell you mine if you tell me yours. Darling, you are perhaps centuries older than I am. How in the hell are you going to remember your first time over these years? Hey, I'm not that old, I only just turned 190 years old. Naruto snorted in amusement. Are you kidding me? That is still old. You are like the equivalent age to 19-year-old human. The dark elf only pouted in return. You're mean. Naruto only laughed. Don't blame me. Blame yourself for walking right into that one. Naruto said while smiled at her. The dark elf smiled in return. You know, I actually like you. I mean, you're actually a pretty decent human being despite all the ones I have met before in our experiences. Naruto's eyes widened. So there are humans here as well. Now that's a surprise, but also a slight relief that makes me look less alienated in this world. But what does she mean by despite their experiences? He mused over their comment and decided to inquire about the particular statement. Why, what makes me special over the rest of the human males in this world? The three glanced at each other and I noticed their discomfort about the topic. Well, no offense to you, but it is generally the males of your race that commit the worst acts against people like us. Women too are not spared by these acts, but it comes in rarity. Naruto scrunched up his face in distaste. She's not false in that regard. It is generally the males who have done worse acts and crimes than the females. You mean like racism and prejudice? The dark elf sighed and nodded. There's that and worse. Ghislaine stepped forward. This mainly applies to the likes of the Empire and some of the other kingdoms that have treated our races unjustly. But the Empire commits the worst acts against us. What do they do? Naruto asked, not liking where this is going. Empire? Kingdoms? Shit, why do I have to be in a time period where the human race is just plain stupid and so hateful all the time? They gather slaves from the other tribes of other races, even gather slaves of their own races. And there have been times where they resisted but the Empire retaliates with skirmishes against them. The Empire wanted to convince their people that the races that resisted against them are evil and savages, which is why so many of your kind have become paranoid about us and the other races. Other reasons are out of greed and profit. Ghislaine said stoically but had a hint of sadness in her eyes. That's just messed up, Naruto said with malice and anger lacing his voice. The two demi-humans and one elf had raised their eyes in surprise at his sudden tone change. This empire, as you call it, and its people are sick. The people are poisoned by uncertainty of not being able to see the real troubles of this world. They debate and they doubt on many things. They are always questioning themselves and others, always unwilling to see what is right before them. While the leaders are consumed by corruption that is so blinding it hurts to see it. They feel comfort in their positions, in their blatant ignorance and power to do what they want, and in their negligence they have failed their country and its people. Hearing that slavery is practiced here sickens me. They think they can take our freedom away from us. For what right do they have to oppress and tell us how to live? What authority do they hold over our very lives? Just whose life is it anyway to make them think that they can just play with it carelessly? Our lives cost so much more than a price that they don't seem to understand how precious it really is other than their own. He explained his reason for their actions with a scowl on his face. The three non-humans blinked in surprise at Naruto's conviction and how much he said about his own race. To think that you hate your own race that much, that's a bit extreme, don't you think? Naruto shook his head. I don't hate everyone in my race. There are a large majority of innocent people that don't deserve it, and some I do indeed hate for their actions against innocence. It's just I have seen and know of their kind all too well. So what is it that you do? I'm a special kind of soldier, part of the SAS, the elite force, the commandos, operators, or the unsung heroes. You point us where to go, even if it is deep within enemy territory or ordered to rescue high-value hostages using whatever means necessary, we will do and we will get the job done. Naruto explained while switching weapons to the HK-417 equipped with a suppressor and a knight. SIS? All three said in union with question marks above their heads. Wait, why be an unsung hero? Why? If you have fought in battles and done such honorable acts, and one, shouldn't you be rewarded as a hero? The elf asked him, as she knew that someone who is a centaur and the entire female centaurs as per their culture value and respect heroism and acts of valor the most would like to meet this person. Simple, it's because it is forbidden for our identities to be revealed. Once the job is done, we don't stick around and bask in the glory of victory and bathe in the cheers of the crowd and receive a thank you and such gratitude from the victims. No, we just get the job done and vacate the area and nothing else. He explained nonchalantly while loading the magazine into the semi-auto sniper rifle and pulled the bolt back and released it till he heard the click. Wow, that is almost sad, said Akane, who felt pretty small but could not comprehend on why anyone who would not care about recognition or fame. Not really, it actually makes perfect. It's more along the lines that if we did reveal ourselves, then there is a chance that our enemies will track us down seeking vengeance against us or our families. But that's cowardice and dishonorable. Have they no shame? Ghislaine raised her eyes on why they would do such a thing, as her culture was that nobody threatens and murders family. And it wasn't enough to stop them from doing it. You take something or someone of theirs, then their response is to no doubt to return the favor back to you. To them honor is just a word and a pretentious term to install rules of fairness in the battlefield. The code of honor is always ignored during the battlefield. It's either you kill or be killed. Naruto gave her a cold, dark look while the three stared into his deep and seemingly bottomless pits of oceanic blue eyes that have seen many things. All three girls widened their eyes when they stared into his eyes. For someone so young they half expected him to be an overly and arrogant soldier flaunting his status of being the best of the best. Instead they saw the eyes and posture of someone who has seen it all, a true warrior. Then Naruto brightened up and smiled. Well then, perhaps I didn't introduce myself earlier. My name is Sergeant Naruto Uzumaki Price, and it is a pleasure to meet all three of you. Now shall we all get going, miss? The dark elf shook her head and smiled back with interest in this enigmatic blonde. Akane Zhao Warain, she answered back pleasantly. Ghislaine Dodorudia, she nodded in a greeting kind of way. Cathal of the Minotaurus clan. Cathal gave out a wave. That's a pretty simple name for a clan. Naruto pointed out. So are the rest of us in our clan. The reason why our clan leader named it that is that our clan is run mostly by female minotaurs. This sounds quite like an Amazonas tribe where they have strict rules regarding males entering their clan. And what of the males? She sighed and rubbed the back of her head. Same reason as the centaur females, we got sick of them. The males are overly brutish and aggressive by nature. Over time they just turned into vulgar, crass and violent beasts that values raw strength over all, just like the militaristic centaur males. All of the male counterparts are born as part man and part bull, so in common sense they would be acting more like a wild beast, but for the women we are mostly born as a lactating type like that of a cow, always carefree and easygoing. But there are some females born with bull-like attributes and can be quite aggressive, but they are loyal to our clan. Naruto deadpanned at her story. Somehow that does not surprise me. Ghislaine stepped up and raised her hand. We have the same problem with my race as well, but not almost as bad. There are alpha males, the leaders of the pack in our tribes, and sometimes they have many disputes and fights for the role of alpha male, either to impress someone of our clan or out of desire. When it gets to mating season it gets quite hectic and annoying. The males are very territorial regarding their females and will attempt to scare you off or attack you if you approach any of their women or a female they have marked as their mating target. Naruto only sweat dropped at that one and couldn't help but ask, did you have any heir? Yes and no. Huh? Yes, I did get a lot of attention, especially from the males, but I turned them all down. They didn't like it and instead they decided to take me by force. In the end they all lost. She said coolly. Youch. The pussies got the boot, literally. Naruto smirked inside his head and turned to Akane. Do you have problems with your males? He asked her. Nah, our men are civilized and fun to be around, but I never see me being with one of them for some time. She responded with a shrug. Fair enough, it's your life. Naruto nodded. She nodded back with a smile. Well, it was fun chatting despite what happened earlier. Cathal gave a light glare to Naruto, who only whistled innocently but had a sweat drop forming on the back of his head. Why, what happened? Akane raised an eyebrow at Cathiel, who looked away to hide her blush. It's nothing. Ghislaine interrupted with a smaller bush forming on her face as the memory was still quite clear. She looked up from the trench as her ears twitched. We need to get moving, the spiders are on the move. And all that shouting earlier might have alerted a couple of them here. If so, then we can't take the stairs or climb up the wall. 1, it's too unstable. 2, they would be waiting for us up there, and 3, we mustn't use any light lest you want to be caught further on inside this trench. Naruto explained. But we won't be able to see. Akane protested. Well, I suspect she will be fine. Naruto pointed out to Ghislaine. How come? Cats have more sensitive vision capabilities than an average human that allows them to see in the dark quite well. Ghislaine only nodded. But what about us? Akane asked. Actually, it is just you. Cathal commented. I can also see and move in the dark just as fine as Ghislaine. But I can't see well in the dark? Akane pouted while mustering something about demi-humans and their animal traits. Don't worry, we won't be completely blind, which is why I have this. Naruto tapped onto the night vision scope attachment on his semi-auto sniper rifle. This tool allows me to see in the dark but also allows me to use my weapon at the same time. But wouldn't that attract unwanted attention? I have that covered too. Naruto pointed to his suppressed barrel. This is called a suppressor. This suppresses the noise greatly but does not silence it completely. It can still be heard, but if an enemy was further out he wouldn't be able to hear weapon go off with the suppressor attached. Alright, I will take your word for it. She nodded and took point. We will go through the mining trench. She pointed down on the floor where we noticed that there were rail tracks for the mine carts. If we follow these iron bars we should be able to reach a slope. Wow, the dwarves are pretty innovative. They've already invented railway tracks. I mused to myself in interest. Is that what they are called? Ghislaine tilted her head. It was made specifically for the mine carts in transporting loads of rock, metal ore and gems in greater quantity and faster than the use of carts that you people usually use. But the range and the positioning of said tracks are quite limited, so you have to build quite a lot of them to support railway transportation. Wow, that's amazing. Katha's eyes shimmered in fascination. How do you know so much about these dwarven contraptions? Because we invented them back home. But I thought you said that the dwarves invented it first. In your world, yes, in mine we humans have invented and perfected it. Are you saying that you are not from this world, Naruto? Ghislaine inquired as she was suspicious of what he had meant. Yes I am, and I am not joking about this. Cathal and Akane's face faulted in shock. What did you use to get to here? Ghislaine questioned sternly. Some giant structure like a gateway portal from one world to another. A gate? That is exactly what we are looking for in the quest detail given to us by the client. Tell me, where is it? Directly above us and hidden in a wall that I smashed my way out of, and unfortunately you won't find anything of use up there. The portal's gone and the gate is too damaged to keep on supporting the portal. The only thing you would find up there is my two teammates who didn't make it through the portal's collapse. Naruto said solemnly. What were their names? One was new, so I only knew him by his alias name Lloyd, and my commanding officer Falcon, who was leading the front of our investigation. What's with the alias names? In Special Forces TAMS that's what we refer ourselves as, so our enemy won't know what our name was. My alias name is Maelstrom. Ghislaine only sighed at the news. Well, I don't know how our client will react to this, but we will have to take his word for it. It is too dangerous here and we need to leave. Couldn't agree more. Akane agreed with her cat-like teammate. I can smell the rottenness and decay of this place. I can tell the orcs are near. Disgusting things, she said in disgust. Naruto deadpanned. I know I'm the type to not be prejudiced and I absolutely disagree on racism. But I can tell that these orcs are going to be a major problem. To be sure, I should gather more information about them. Why so hostile? What made them to be so hated? You don't know? I know of them through some means, but I want to know what you all think of them. Naruto proposed to them. Akane shrugged and Ghislaine told him of her opinion or facts about the orcs. Orcs are violent warmongering savages. They have always based themselves as scavengers and opportunistic carnivores, while they do possess a low amount of cunningness and a low intelligence when compared to other more intellectual species. Orcs do possess a crude culture of their own, but they are more violent by nature as they will fight ferociously if compelled, but they tend to lean more towards more chaotic, destructive behavior. The Empire likes to collect these orcs and uses them as expendable pawns way up front for their soldiers on the battlefield. On their own, they form up groups of malicious marauders that prey on innocent villagers and pillage them to satisfy their own bloodlust, and don't even get me started on what they do to the women. In fact, we are risking ourselves greatly in coming here where there are large concentrations of them somewhere in the ruins or the mines. So far we were lucky not to encounter them yet. But I do not wish to think what they would do to us if we were captured. She grimaced at that possibility. Naruto frowned at that explanation. Yep, I expect it is such that information is bang on accurate, alright. I've seen many depictions of orcs like the ones from Lord of the Rings, Warhammer, Warcraft, Elder Scrolls, anime and manga, and weirdly I will admit to it, I have seen hentai of that orc shit. It was sent to me by a friend and he made me watch it. Don't remember the name of it because I didn't bother watch that shit again. Who the hell wants to watch someone getting raped by a mythical creatures? They are a type of race you love to hate all the time if you ask me. Ahem. Asterisk. Well then, if you don't want to get caught, then I think we should get moving. Oh, and before we go. Naruto pointed his semi-auto sniper upwards and looked into his night vision scope and fired off a round from the suppressed barrel. 4 seconds later, the body of the same spider that dropped them crashed into the cold, unforgiving ground with its insides exploding from the impact and spider blood sprayed all over the floor. Kya! Akane yelped from the sudden noise as she wasn't allowed to use any kind of light source lest she wanted to be seen from the orcs or spiders. Well, depending on this type of spider, I hope by its biology that it can't see in the dark that well. What was that? Akane asked, also quite alarmed by the sudden noise. That's the sound of me saving your life. Naruto said simply, as if it didn't matter that he shot a spider about so far up. But what is that weapon? Ghislaine asked in curiosity. It's a weapon where I come from, but I will tell you more of that later. I will take point. Naruto said while making his way to the front with the rifle in his hands and also rummaging through his side pockets of his burgan and fished out his specialized PDA. He fiddled with his PDA to attach it to the side of his rifle on the rail system of his rifle. And then he tinkered with the features of his PDA to select the motion sensor. He could also switch it to heartbeat sensor, but that only works on beings that have a beating heart. Spiders do have hearts, but their circulatory system works differently to humans. The motion tracker just has a longer range. The main problem with the older models of the motion tracker is that it couldn't tell you where it is picking up movement from, like is it above or below, and it cannot pick up stationary targets. Now with new updates those drawbacks have been solved and it does not act like a sonar system and it can keep track on the moving target wherever it goes and it can give you early warnings if something has crept up onto you. Another problem is that it emits sound when it is on and tracking for movement, so I had to plug in my earphones for that problem, or I could simply turn the sound down. I've seen Alien Isolation with the motion tracker and that thing emits sound loudly whenever something is nearby and the xenomorph can hear it. So just turn the damn thing down if it is causing a problem for you. I turned on my motion tracker and popped an earphone in my ear and looked through the scope and surveyed my surroundings, above me and in the distance to see if there were any more spiders. There were none in sight. Good, we appeared to be in the clear for now. I gave out my analysis. Ghislaine stayed silent as she listened closely for any signs of noise. It's unnaturally quiet, but there are no signs of any more spiders nearby. She nodded to Naruto, confirming his observation. Are you sure you can see through that? Akane asked while looking at the gadget in interest. Trust me, this thing is a lifesaver. Then we will follow your lead. Ghislaine nodded to Naruto, who in return nodded back and started to walk forward with the three of them followed his lead, Gasen behind him followed by Akane and Cathal taking the rear. Intermission. Naruto and the two demi-humans and Dark Elf made their way further into the trench while the light was getting dimmer around them. And it was getting harder to see with how deep the mining trench was. Akane had to stay close to us because she does not possess great night vision despite being supposed immortal beings, but in a sense they are more related to humans in a way. So far the tracker stayed quiet and I didn't see any abnormal anomalies in the scope either. So far everything was quiet. Crunch. Asterisk until I stood on something. Hiii. What was that? Akane jumped in fright. My bad, just stepped on something. Naruto said to calm her down. I looked down to see what I stood on through the scope only to look at a screaming skull of a strange fanged creature. The skeleton still wore its decaying and heavily rusted armor, but this skeleton had its chest cavity caved in by my foot. "Excuse me, mate," Naruto said to the skeleton and lifted his foot out of the skeleton's chest. As soon as he said that, he felt a comforting on his shoulder. He looked back to see the shadow figure of Cathal. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said in condolence. "Wait, what? What are you on about?" Naruto raised an eyebrow in confusion. "You have lost someone dear to you. In demi-human culture, losing your mate can be a hard loss to get over," Cathal said in a comforting way. Naruto's reaction was to simply facepalm. "Oh, for foo? No, Cathal, I did not mean as in this guy was my lover, and I am not gay. Secondly, mate is a slang term for friend from where I come from. But I though he was your Cathal, I am 19 years old and nearly 20. He's a skeleton and he's several decades old. How old do you bloody think I am?" Naruto pointed out in a mock rant. He. Sorry, I can only see the shape but not what it looks like." Cathal laughed in a light-hearted manner. Naruto only rolled his eyes and looked through the scope to observe his surroundings to see an aftermath of what looked like a battle. There were skeleton corpses everywhere. "Damn, what is it?" Akane asked. Backquote. "We seem to have encountered one of many aftermaths of the great battle." He looked into the scope again and widened his eye at how short and stout the skeleton was. "Most, if not all of these corpses are dwarves, what's left of the soldiers and miners in this city." Naruto brought out his torch from his MP5 hanging from his side and turned it on. "Although you said we were not supposed to use any source of light? I'm just taking a quick look around and then I am switching it off," he said while switching on his torch. The torch lit up like a sun in the night sky that has been turned on by a flick of a switch. The girls squinted their eyes, suddenly focusing themselves from the sudden light. "Ah, that's bright," Cathal said uncomfortably. "Geez, it's like a mini sun inside a small tube or handle." "I quite like it," said Ghislaine as she felt captivated by the light. "These guys sure had it rough," Naruto said while ignoring the comments. The girls looked at where the light is pointing at and their eyes widened at what they saw. The stories of the battle were tame compared to the reality of the aftermath right before you. There were piles and piles of deceased dwarves of the great city, killed in multiple ways according to what the skeleton and armor damage shows, like for example death by stabbing, slashing, hacking, crushing, or even shot by arrows, etc. There were skeletons that were not dwarves however, but were taller and larger. They also looked to be wearing cruder armor and weapons compared to the higher quality of metal that the dwarves had in their weapons. These beings looked to have a mix of weapons and armor that looked like it originally didn't belong to them, and a wide range of weapons that was crafted in such a shoddy and crude way. Their skulls were thick and large, and they had sharp teeth protruding outwards like it was made for predators. So these are the warriors of the last stand of Khazad Ladar. They deserve a proper resting place, not just dumped in a trench and forsake them. This is just disrespectful, and the dead can be very vengeful if not laid to rest properly. Ghislaine commented with a cold frown. Oh, you have got to be kidding me. Now of all things it's supernatural bullshit. Seriously, that shit is not cool. Naruto sighed in frustration and a deadpan. Akane pulled out an arrow out of a dead dwarf's chest and analyzed the type of arrow. Both orc and goblin arrows and weapons were used here. There also are hints of ogre and troll weapons and corpses lying about in some places. Geez, it's like a nesting area for all of the worst and vile scumbags in this place. Sadly, that is what this place has degenerated into. Ghislaine nodded and Cathal shrugged. I wouldn't be surprised if a few of the aggressive minotaurs were here. Some are not as civil as the other races and can be much worse than an orc. All that is doing is putting more unwanted pressure on us. We're already in enough trouble as it is, she added. I switched my torch off and navigated through the corpses. Watch your step, I said to the girls. Intermission. 10 minutes later, at least I think it has been. I can't really see my watch and I don't really want to mess with the PDA unless I miss something in that short moment. How long do we have to keep moving for? Naruto asked Ghislaine behind him. We should be able to reach a steep slope soon. Just keep on following these tracks as you call them and you should find it, she answered. And true to her word, we met a steep slope, but it was more of an incline for the tracks where the tracks went up a steep slope. I wondered on how the dwarves could even get a heavy load of mine carts up there filled with loads of metal ores and gems. My answer was to look on the left track that had groups of 5 mine carts left abandoned but still had its tattered cover on it. The mine carts were old and rusted on the metal parts along with worn wooden parts that made up the frame of the carts. They had not been used in a long time and it still had a delivery to do, which was why it was waiting for its turn to go up the incline. From the looks of the mine carts, they looked large and similar enough to the open-top mineral wagons made out of planks of wood, or as they were called in England, coal trucks from the 1920s, 30s and 40s that you would find in those preserved British heritage railways that the train enthusiasts seem to love. Naruto walked up to the wagons and climbed on top of it and lifted the tattered cover off. It was filled with many metal ores, some that were similar, such as iron, copper, gold, and silver were the most recognizable metals among the rest of them. But there were metals that he was not familiar with and they looked somewhat off. Moo! Cathal squealed in enthusiasm. So many metal ores, and there are even the rarer kinds too. Asterio would love this as well as I am now. Cathal had raced over to the wagons and easily towered over them and was peeking over the top and looked at the metal ores with sparkly eyes. Naruto chuckled at the sight. Somebody's excited at the sight of metal. Asterio is a minotaurus same as me, who is also my friend. I first worked at farming for some time, but then later she introduced me to blacksmithing and I got just as good as Asterio is. If we bring some of these metal ores to her, she will know what to do with them. If you have that much faith in your friend, then I will believe your word. But what are these metals anyway, specifically those? He pointed to the rare metal ores. Ah, those metal ores are the legendary mithril ore and ebony ore. In these lands they are more desired than gold and silver by all people, from the common people to the nobility. Mithril, even in its purest form, is actually rather soft and malleable. It can be used for a whole range of various alloys to produce extremely lightweight, hard and durable armor, but its main disadvantage is that while somebody wears something like a chainmail vest, they can indeed be saved from a stab or a slash, but the impact can still probably kill you depending on where they hit and how hard, with hard-hitting weapons like blunt weapons such as a mace or warhammer. Ebony is the opposite of the lightweight mithril and acts as the absolute defensive armor, but depending on the wielder or wearer of ebony armor and weapons, it can be quite heavy. Ebony needs to be and only be worked when heated, as it will develop small cracks that eventually shatter the material if you hammer the ore cold. And unlike most of your common armors, ebony will not alloy with iron. It must be used purely, she explained sagely. Naruto instantly face-faulted. So pretty much it's like a mixture of platinum, titanium and tungsten, but can be molded into wearable armor. But those names though, this really a fantasy wonderland, but can easily kill you if you're not careful. I can picture anyone gunning for this opportunity. Even the governments from my world wouldn't pass an opportunity like this. The possibilities in this though. Well, I would probably pass on the mithril as it is too bright of a metal unless I could cover it up somehow. I would probably make armor plates out of ebony for my vest for spares. Cathal did say that her friend is a skilled blacksmith. I wonder? He mused to himself. Cathal, how good would you say your friend is at blacksmithing? Naruto asked her. Cathal smirked. Without a doubt one of the best in this world. She was actually apprenticed by dwarven blacksmith who was a master at it before he passed away, which why she is so good at what she does now. She has trained me, but I am nowhere near her level of expertise. She said proudly of her friend. In that case we should take the iron ore too. Why would you want the cheap iron ore? Because iron ore can then be smelted into steel, which is 4 times thicker and denser than regular iron. Exactly right, Naruto. So you know some knowledge about metals, huh? Cathal said to Naruto curiously. I know plenty enough about metals and I have the knowledge of how to make some of them, ones that are useful to be precise. Steel has a wide range of possible uses, so if possible I could make even stronger grades of steel that could give the metals a run for their money. He responded, well, if it's possible, or I would need to find alternate ways in making them, seeing as there are no steel works around. Huh, so you say there are stronger types of steel? I would like to see that. Cathal chuckled. Well, that's if I have the right tools to make it. Naruto sighed and jumped off of the carts and walked up to the front of them. Naruto saw that at the front was long strong chain attached to the coupling of the mine cart wagon, and it went straight up the incline. Naruto brought up his rifle and peered through the scope. At the top of the incline was a familiar looking mechanism. So the dwarves use a winching mechanism, huh? Most likely it is hand-cranked or uses a weighting system. Naruto analyzed in his head. Ooh, we should take some of the ore. That way this quest won't turn out to be a total failure. Cathal suggested. Yeah, Ghislaine, we could be hitting it rich with this amount. In case if you have forgotten, we would be painting a huge target on our backs. The humans don't take kindly to us demi-humans that well. This human doesn't mind us and neither does Clan Formal. Akane shrugged. I was referring to the Empire and the nearby kingdoms and vassal states. They would rob us blind if we were to live like royalty. Bloody hell, is it really that bad? It's like early 20th century racism where they deny any privileges to foreign races, but worse. Naruto scowled, adding more distaste for this world. If it's really that bad, then you might as well just use the ore into something useful for yourself instead of selling it for money. Naruto added his insight. Akane sighed but nodded. Cathal nodded with glee and Ghislaine nodded at his insight. I suppose it would be worth the trouble, and we can visit Astoria after this. Cathal and I still have our carrier bags, so we can good amount of these ores. Naruto, do you think you could lend us your bag? It looks like it can carry much more than ours. Ghislaine asked politely. Naruto nodded as he can trust these guys with his burgan. For your information, it is called a burgan. Now I'm going to go up there and scout out the area while you lot load up the ores, and don't forget to pick up the iron ore. He threw off his burgan and giving his shoulders a quick roll around with a satisfying click, he opened up his burgan and picked out a few weapons to take with him. He picked out the L85A2 with the underslung grenade launcher and the Mossberg 590, both slung behind his back, and the MP5 to his side. All guns had plenty of ammunition in the pouches of his vest in various places, and the rest was in his burgan. Okay, I'm trusting you with some of my stuff here, and don't nick anything out of it. I would know otherwise. Hey, relax Blondie, you can trust us here. But you are going to look through my stuff anyway, aren't you? Naruto raised an eyebrow at Akane. Maybe Tilda? She said teasingly. Naruto rolled his eyes and picked out a few emergency flares. See these? In case if you have an emergency down here, like an enemy pops up. Lift the top off of these and strike the top of the lid onto this surface here. I will take a few of these for myself and will do the same. Naruto explained while demonstrating the use, but did not light up the flare. Ghislaine nodded and accepted the flares. What do these do? It's a warning to each of us, a signal that will notify either of us depending on who lights it first. You will know once you see it in case if I use it. Naruto explained to her. Ghislaine just accepted his response and went to packing the ores into the bags. How will you contact us if it is clear up there? She asked further. Then I will flash my light down the trench a few times, you should see it easily. If you see a red light, then that means danger. He answered, to which she nodded. Naruto grabbed onto the chain and gave it a good pull to see if it is sturdy enough despite all of the rust. Fortunately it remained strong and firm enough to support his weight. Naruto began his traverse up the steep incline with all of his weapons strapped behind his back in slings and holsters. This much climbing was nothing to Naruto but painful for any normal man. But Naruto didn't mind and kept on going, ignoring the slight fatigue and pain he was feeling in his legs. But he soldiered on up the incline until he reached the top. Once he reached the top he had a thought, I guess I could have given them a radio, but then that would mean teaching them on how to use it. Ah, never mind, they should be fine down there. Naruto shrugged. Naruto looked around and indeed he did see an oversized winch mechanism with chains wrapped around the wooden cylinder. How the mechanism worked was that there were two tracks where one side goes up and the other goes down. Naruto guessed that at the top is where the ores and minerals get unloaded and then send the empty carts back down the incline, where the carts that are full will be brought up the incline with a strong chain attached to the coupling, but the coupling looked severely rusted and looked as if it could break from the strain. The carts that were left abandoned at the top of the incline had a block positioned in front of the wheels, preventing the carts from moving when the coupling is detached and also preventing any accidents if the chain is broken. And also the winch operated mostly from some sort of gears that operates from a hand crank that would require a 2 or more man job to operate. Otherwise you would need the heavy load at the top going down the incline while the empty carts gets pulled up by the weight. While he was surveying the surroundings and the winching mechanism, he was suddenly hit by a strong smell, one that was really familiar coming from the mine carts. His curiosity getting the better of him, he went up to the carts and lifted the covers off the open top and was greeted with a familiar substance. Holy crap, they even have gunpowder. Do they even know the uses of this? I have so got to take some of this. He found a large copper pot nearby as some of the containers were in his burden down the incline, so he had to make do. He scooped up the black powder that wasn't ruined into the copper pot and sealed it with military duct tape that I conveniently had with me and taped it on my side and slapped it on. That thing is not going anywhere. I wonder how the girls are doing down there, he thought to himself. Naruto soon got his answer, as then suddenly felt and heard a rumble and a demonic screech he heard down below. Naruto felt concerned for them and rushed back over to the edge of the incline and saw that the red flare was lit and flashing furiously down at the bottom, while the person who couldn't see who was wielding it was waving it frantically as if they were calling for his help and they need it now. Naruto wasted no time and grabbed his sniper rifle, folded out the bipod and laid on his torso. He set the rifle up comfortably and peered through the scope. He saw that it was Akane who was waving the flare quite frantically, and her face read that she was desperately in need of help. She held onto the flare for a few moments before she was forced to drop it by a rather large entity charging at her. And this strange creature, or whatever this thing was, made my eye widen in surprise and shock. I could see it was glowing red hot like lava. Play Devil May Cry. Phantom boss theme. From the looks of this unknown entity, it was some sort of oversized tarantula or scorpion. He couldn't really tell which one, as this creature held similarities between the two. It has the carapace and tail and stinger of a scorpion and a body and face of that of a tarantula. Think of Phantom off of Devil May Cry 1. Its carapace was dark like obsidian and its joints and unprotected parts were like it was flowing like molten lava, but at the same time wasn't, as it sort of looked like some kind of dark energy, and also its tail is made entirely of it. I could see that they would need my help for this, as they probably won't be able to handle an opponent like that for long without strong backup. But the problem is that I am too far away from them, and the only thing I could do is provide sniper support from here. But would it be enough though? Naruto thought critically to himself. Naruto lined up a shot towards its face as it was attempting to aim for a lunge at Cathal, as she had let her guard down slightly and briefly leaving herself open. I fired a shot at its face, but it didn't penetrate, but only chipping a piece off the carapace shell. The demonic-looking tarantula was thrown off from his attack as the bullet had actually hurt him. Then he left himself open for Cathal for her to swing her hammer directly to his face, effectively stunning him for a moment for Akane and Ghislaine to charge in, with Akane firing off a volley of arrows at its face. One hit its eye and then blinded. But in the end it only served to piss off the giant arachnid more and was twice as aggressive as before. Naruto fired off several more shots into its face and tail to prevent it from attacking, but after each shot it looked like it was ignoring the pain from getting pieces of its carapace shot off from his sniper rifle. And then it looked up at me with those menacing red eyes, and I knew I was only making it angrier with each shot. This method is taking too long to kill it. I know I am hurting it, but pain won't kill him quickly enough for them to survive. I need something more powerful, and the grenade launcher won't cut it because of the distance and I might hit them by accident. Plus I can't see them down there due to the darkness. He mused to himself. Suddenly he thought up of an idea that was risky but could work out. He got back up, trusting the girls down there to hold out long enough for him to hatch his plan. Naruto ran up to the carts and brought out a small clump of C4 and stuck it to the front of the carts. Naruto then noticed that there was a block holding the carts in place by the wheel on the track attached to a rope. Nice and convenient, he thought. Naruto gathered the end of the rope into his hand and primed the C4, ready with the trigger being his PDA system, like how mobile phones were used to arm nitro cells back in his job with Team Rainbow. He got back into his position before and kept a lookout and waited for the right moment. But then another thought popped up into his head. How am I going to warn them though? I don't want them getting caught up into the blast, he thought while scrounging around his head for ideas. Fortunately he found a solution. He remembered that he had on part of his radio with him, and that the others were in a small pocket in his burgan, and one of them was still on according to his radio, that he could see a green LED light shining on his radio controls for the second radio that was still on. But they were still in the burgan and they don't know how to use it. Secondly, they were used as earphones. But then Naruto had an idea. Ghislaine is part cat. Therefore she has sharp hearing, so she would most likely be able to hear my voice over the radio. Naruto muttered to himself as he tuned into the short mid-range radio. Naruto successfully connected to the second radio and began his message to her. Ghislaine, if you can hear me, push that thing onto the empty tracks. I repeat, push that thing onto the empty tracks. He ordered down the mic. And now he waited and watched on the battle down below, watching if they had heard and understood his message and will see that order through. With Ghislaine, Akane and Cathal several minutes before. What a useful bag this bugger, baka, what was it? Cathal scratching her head in confusion. Burgan, Akane corrected. Cathal snapped her fingers together. That's the one, I was close enough. But still I like the size of this. I would think this bag was made for me. Cathal said, admiring the usefulness of the burgan and its size and strength. How can he carry so much weight around when it is full? Akane questioned. Must be a pretty tough man to haul such weight around during his travels. From the looks of those weapons and equipment, they must be quite heavy, even for a human. That is still impressive. There have been some humans who could do somewhat others would call impossible feats to attain. Superior strength would be one of them. But the human males would often think that strength is the most important aspect to have in battle. But for Naruto, I believe he has many aspects he thinks that are equally important to have. Like what? Akane inquired. More endurance, the ability to strive further in any difficult situations where most would have given up. I could see it in his eyes, the exhaustion and the pain he is going through. He is simply brushing it off and paying no attention. Now that you mention it, he did have those dark rings around his eyes. Has he not been sleeping for? Akane nodded, feeling a bit concerned about the blonde SF operator. Even the best warriors need a good night's sleep. Cathal added in her thoughts. Says you sleep like log for hours sometimes. Akane teased her. Maybe it's because I do most of the heavy lifting in this team that I get rather tired and need a good rest sometimes. And you're the one to talk, slacker. Cathal countered with a shrug and finished packing the raw metal ores into the burgan and hoisted it onto her shoulders snugly. Fits me perfectly, Cathal said cheerily, ignoring Akane's pouting and ranting to Cathal. Ghislaine, who had just finished packing, suddenly heard a noise as her ears perked up, sensing the nearby potential threat. She let out a hiss to warn the other two to be on alert. They responded by drawing their weapons, Cathal with her warhammer, Akane her bow and Ghislaine her longsword. They waited for a while, and whatever Ghislaine had sensed as she knew it was coming closer, but where? Then she noticed a dim light coming closer to them up above them. The light looked like a burning ball of molten rock, but it wasn't a rock, as legs had spread out of it and landed with a might crash onto the ground. The legs started moving as the demonic beast started moving forward. The three girls were now sweating nervously. What is that? Cathal asked while gripping her hammer tensely. Akane answered, also as tense as her partner, a demon, from Hardy's realm of the underworld. But that can't be, why is one of her demons here? The demonic arachnid crawled up to them while impaling his legs into the ground. Bah, More pathetic little things crawling about where they don't belong, always sticking their noses into where they shouldn't go. Akane stepped forward and confronted the demon, Demon of Hardy. Why are you here? Demons are forbidden to enter our realm. The arachnid only laughed, bahahaha. According to Hardy, she could care less of our absence in the underworld, and I happen to like this place that those pathetic, greedy and selfish dwarves built for themselves. So made myself at home right before I and those savages took their homes from them. The three girls widened their eyes at the revelation. So it was you who lead the invasion. The demon only tilted its head. Who, me? Nah, not my thing, that would be the orc warlord Osric the Besieger. He was the mastermind of this invasion. Even for a mindless orc he was a somewhat decent tactician, I will admit. Who or what are you, demon? And what are you doing here? Ghislaine confronted it with a glare. Faye, watch your tone, weakling, or I will, as the humans call it, step on you like a bug. As for what I am called, I am known as Baratham. As why I am here, to simply kill the one who killed my spider brethren. I quite liked them, and then I suddenly find them dead with holes punched through them. Now who was the one responsible for all that? Baratham said hoarsely, with malice oozing out of his voice, and his eyes brightened up into a blood-red color. The three of them all slightly flinched at who he was referring to and said person was all the way up there in a safe spot. They were in big trouble now. What should we do? Fighting it would be difficult. Demons although are rare, but they can still be killed. We need his help, Ghislaine announced. You mean, Akane, take this stick and do what Naruto has said earlier. Ghislaine gave Akane the flare. What makes you think he hasn't run off already? Akane narrowed her eye in skepticism. I doubt he would do that. If he was, then he would have forsaken us to die earlier. Akane nodded and accepted the flare and made her way over to incline, removing the top of the flare. Cover me, she called out to her companions. What do you think I am doing? Cathal replied with a grunt as she smacked the demon's leg away with a loud clang. Baratham felt disgruntled at the slight pain he felt from the hit, as nobody had laid a crack on his shell before. Some scratches before, but they were nothing. Gah, you wretched degenerated bitch of a cow. Nobody has laid a crack on my shell in centuries, and none shall survive to even boast about it. Geez, your compliment flatters me, Cathal said uncaringly at its murderous tone. Akane took the chance from the demon's distraction. She hurried over to the incline and pooped the cap off and held the stick and cap both together, remembering what Naruto had said earlier, and swiped the top over it. She at first didn't know how hard she needed to swee and kept swiping out of frustration until at last, as she pressed the cap in further and harder, he flare lit up like a second sun in the darkness. She waved it around hoping to catch his attention, but she couldn't see him up there. Unfortunately, Baratham had noticed the sudden bright light and headed over to her instead. Akane dropped the flare onto the ground and dive rolled out of the way as it charged at her, but its charge was interrupted by Ghislaine, who dashed onto his back and impaled her sword into one of the cracks. RRAGH. You bitch, I'll enjoy killing you, and maybe when I am done I'll enjoy wiping out your race so they can meet Hardy in the underworld. Baratham howled out into a fit of rage. Ghislaine jumped off of the demon, but then noticed that her sword was heating up and burning red. We need to kill it fast before the demon's own body will melt and deform our weapons. Easier said than done. Where is Naruto? We need his help. Alkane fired off an arrow into the unprotected open cracks of the shell, only hurting him little as the arrow would only melt and set ablaze on impact, so it didn't prove much usefulness. It's his shell that's his weakness, but also his strongest point. If we break it apart, then he will be finished. Ghislaine announced to them. I can't shoot through that shell with my arrows alone, they're not strong enough. Akane said to her, shaking her head at the revelation. What about your spirit magic? Surely you could enchant your arrows. Cathal pointed out. Yes, but I am not willing for every living thing in this mountain to swarm us when one of my enchanted arrows go off. That move is too loud. Akane shook her head in denial. Cathal had parried a strike from the demon arachnid as it had used its stinger made of magma and molten rock. The impact had knocked her off balance, giving Baratham the chance to strike. Cathal, Ghislaine and Akane both shouted to their companion as they feared for her life. It wasn't until they heard a pinging sound and a shatter against Baratham's face that had threw off his attack way off, and shards of his face had exploded off of his face. That intervention had saved Cathal's life. Arg, who was that? He roared, enraged at the fact that somebody else was apparently present in this fight and he hadn't known of his presence. RRAGH. Cathal counter-attacked by smashing her hammer with a great swing directly in the demon's face, cracking its face even further, almost splitting it. The demon flew quite a distance away, smashing into the trench wall in a daze. Akane and Ghislaine saw their chance to strike as Akane pulled back the string on her bow with 3 arrows positioned, and she fired all 3 at Baratham's face. Fortunately enough, one of the arrows had a direct hit into one of his eyes, effectively blinding the 1 eye out of 8. Ghislaine couldn't get close enough in time as she was forced to retreat as the demon arachnid had went into a fit of rage. Akane, however, turned to Ghislaine for answers. "What just happened? I just saw something hit that demon in the face and shattered a piece off of it, not to mention Cathal wouldn't be alive if it hadn't been for that intervention." Ghislaine looked up to the top of the incline intently and saw a figure way up at the top. "I suspect it was Naruto's doing with that peculiar weapon of his. I heard a small brief sound like air being blown out of something at the top of the slope, so it must have been him." Cathal also looked up the incline and gave a mental thank you to Naruto. "I suppose I could forgive him for earlier. Maybe I should repay him with anything he wants from me, or of me." Cathal briefly blushed at that though, but shook her head and focused back to the task at hand. Suddenly there were several more pinging noises coming from his face as pieces of his shell was crumbling off, and even another eye had exploded from the impact. Baratham then looked up the incline. "So that's where you are, you little shit. I hope you are sitting comfortably up there as you watch your horse die painfully as I melt off their flesh, and you can only watch helplessly, and then I will be going after you next once I am through with them." He bellowed his promise of pain. The adventurers grasped onto their weapons more tightly at the threat against them and their friend. They were about to go in for another attack until Ghislaine's cat ears had twitched as it picked up a voice coming from one of pockets in the Bergen backpack. Ghislaine could clearly hear the voice and recognized it as Naruto's. "Wait, Naruto says we must drive it onto the empty line tracks. Wait, but he is all the way up there. I heard his voice coming from the Bergen. How did he get in here?" Cathal turned her head to the Bergen. "Oi Naruto, you in there?" Cathal called out to the Bergen. Cathal opened the one pocket that the voice was coming from and picked out a wireless radio earpiece and then held it against her ear. "Beast. I repeat again, you must push that thing onto the empty rail tracks. Once it is on there, you might want to take cover behind those minecarts. Preferably I would want it stunned or immobilized before it is in the right position, Beast. Naruto called out on the earpiece. "What did it or Naruto say?" Akane asked. "Drive that demon onto the other tracks and make sure it stays there, it seems." Ghislaine answered calmly and collectively. "How in the hell does he expect us to do that? He has a plan and he needs us to carry it through. But it won't be easy." "I know, but we must do it." Ghislaine dashed to her target in a zigzag maneuver, and the arachnid demon eyed her intently, determined to impale her at the right time before his concentration was thrown off. Another silent bullet striking against his fang and shot it straight off. The arachnid recoiled as it howled pain, and that led to Akane gaining the chance to let loose her volley and shot another arrow into one of its eyes. The spider jumped onto 4 of its legs, screeching in agony. Cathal then charged like a rampant bull and swung her hammer over her shoulder and head and struck the head of the hammer onto Baratham's bottom torso. Baratham lost his balance on his 4 kegs and tumbled backwards from the brute force of the hammer strike had sent him tumbling on his back like a vulnerable turtle on its back. Back with Naruto. Naruto saw the whole thing as he was supporting them with sniper cover. He worked in sync with Ghislaine without her knowing that he wasn't, shot off one its fangs and then let the other 2 do all the work from there. Until he saw that they did exactly what he told them to do, he saw his chance. Now, Naruto yanked on the rope and the wooden block flew off the track, preventing the minecarts in place. With a squeak, rattle and roll of rusted metal, they slowly moved out of the shed where the winching mechanism was stationed. Just as the trucks had reached the edge of the incline that was going down, they suddenly stopped where they were. Naruto's face faltered at that anti-climax. "Oh, for fuck's sake, it's still connected to the winch," he said, aggravation. Secondly, the winch was jammed due to the metal parts being heavily rusted. His brief moment of anger was soon interrupted as he then heard a straining noise coming from the winch that was coupled to the carts at the back. From the sound of it, the couplings that were chains were so rusted that it couldn't handle the weight. One of the links on the chains were slowly being torn apart by the weight until snap, and then they were off, thundering down the incline, going faster and faster. "Hurrah, Naruto cheered as he peered through the scope waiting for the moment. Back with the girls. What are we waiting for exactly? Cathal questioned, hiding behind the mine carts stationed at the bottom, and all three of them were peeking out of cover at the demon who was thrashing around in pain and frustrating attempts to upright himself. He didn't say. Ghislaine answered. I swear to the gods if he— Akane grinded her teeth. Be patient and have faith in him. Ghislaine reassured her dark elf companion. Gals, the demon's getting back up, said Kathy L in worry as she gripped onto her hammer. Ah shit, he took too long. Akane cursed as she primed her arrow to her bow. Wait, I can hear something coming down. Ghislaine stopped them. Baratham soon uprighted himself and laughed. Bahaha. You should have ran while you had the gloves are coming off, and this time there is no holding back. Baratham spat out in anger as a few globs of lava flew out of his mouth from his threat. He would have charged if he wasn't distracted by a sudden sound that sounded like metal screeching and clattering. What the hell is that noise? He turned to face the noise, but he soon came face to face of the mine carts that had thundered down the incline at such a speed that it was a surprise that it didn't collapse or derail itself halfway down. The mine carts collided into his face with a force that tripled the force of Cathal's hammer swing. When the leading cart crashed into Baratham's face, the rest followed through on the force, doubling the impact it gave, and then the mine carts were soon flipped up and derailed into the air and landed on Baratham, burying him in shattered frames of the carts as well as their loads of black powder. The three had seen the whole scene enacting and were speechless at the convenient timing at the sudden intervention. Until they heard a beeping coming from the wreckage of the carts and spilled black powder, and Baratham covered in a heap of it and pieces of the cart resting on top of his body. Boom! A mighty explosion roared from the wreckage, and the detonation had ignited the black powder into a massive inferno and flew upwards in a giant fireball. The three were startled at the explosion as the blast had rocketed past them and blasted against the carts, almost uplifting them. The explosion made Cathal jump in fright while covering her ears, while Akane did the same with hers. Ghislaine, however, was rolling on the floor clutching her ears as they were super sensitive to sound. You're welcome, by the way. Song end. Akane stomped over to the mic that Ghislaine had in her coat pocket. Ignoring the unusual device's appearance, she shouted down the mic. What the hell was that, Naruto? I believe that was the sound of me saving your life. His tone sounded suspiciously close to smugness. Well, it's a good thing I can't hear that particular sound properly as my ears are ringing, you bastard. Akane ranted. Well, you're alive, are you not? Ghislaine is on the floor writhing in pain as her ears are really sensitive to sound. Cathal looks spooked, and I am really pissed. I am so going to kill you, Naruto. You would have to come up here first. Oh, I intend to. She growled. No, seriously, I mean it. Why? Just look up. Akane did exactly that and saw that the fireball had ignited the mass amount of web that covered up the vast majority of the mining trench. What they didn't know was that the giant spider's web fluids were highly flammable, apparently. The fire had lit up the whole spider's web throughout the whole trench like a torch and paved its way through the whole trench like an inferno, burning every corpse, both alive and dead, that had been trapped in the web, and every spider along with it that was currently in the trench. You need to get up here fast. That would no doubt alert everything in this mine and the city nearby like a lit-up beacon in a desert in the middle of the night. And whose fault do you think that was? Quit your dawdling and get up here immediately. Who do you think you are to order me? Move it now. Naruto roared down the mic, and she could his echo from above. Akane looked put the incline in surprise to hear someone raise their voice at her in a commanding voice. Akane, he's right, we need to get where he is. Ghislaine grasped onto her shoulder and was now recovered from earlier. Akane scowled, still feeling upset. Alright, fine, we'll meet you there, and don't you dare think about abandoning us here. Don't worry, I have no desire to forsake you to the wolves. I will cover you from up here. With that weapon you used against Baratham? Ghislaine asked him. Is that what they call him? And yes, precisely that, he answered. Ghislaine nodded and went up to Cathal. Snap out of it, Cathal, we need to get moving. Cathal shook her head as she returned from her brief shock moment. Huh? Yes, sure. She got herself out of the small episode of shock and hoisted the Bergen comfortably on her shoulders. Wait, how are we going to get Kathy L up there? I don't think the chain would hold her weight. Are you calling me fat? Said Cathal to Akane indignantly and slightly offended. Just tell her to use the rails as if it was a ladder. Naruto cut in to offer his idea. I suppose that could work, but is it stable enough? Ghislaine thought over it. The iron bars will hold out fine, it's the wooden planks you need to watch your step on. Other than that you should be fine, Naruto assured them. Alright then, Akane, you go first and cover us on the way up. Cathal, you're next, as you are carrying the heaviest load. I will stand behind you to assure that you won't slip. How confident are you to support the weight of a Minotaur female carrying a warhammer and loads of metal ore in my Bergen? We cat people are excellent climbers, that is why we have such strong bodies. I am probably the strongest of my clan, perhaps even my race, despite my father being human, and I could and will carry my best friends up this slope even if I have to, if it kills me, to keep my friends safe. She said in both pride and in conviction. Her friends smiled at their friend's loyalty to them. Then get climbing. I am picking up movement of multiple hostiles up here, and I can hear battle chants, war cries and battle drums. They are preparing for war up here, and they are calling for our blood. Alright, we will leave our protection to you. Copy that. The three adventurers hurried to the incline while Akane went up first. She ascended up quickly and gracefully by just jumping up the planks. Cathal wasn't as quick but scaled up the tracks, pulling her up and using the rails as a grip to throw her up. Even with all of the weight she is carrying, it didn't slow her down and exhaust her. Ghislaine would have been the quickest climber, but she was the second strongest, so she volunteered to watch the rear in case anyone loses balance and grip on the tracks. While the three ascended up the tracks at a fast pace, Naruto was keeping the girls covered at the top of the incline and the trench. His eyes were scanning his surroundings and also keeping an eye on his movement sensor and switching it to heartbeat sensor in case he missed anything. Naruto counted at 7, then 15, and then it jumped up. 35 hostiles coming their way. And what's worse is that the girls are in an open spot where they could easily get shot at due to the web catching on fire. It has illuminated the whole trench, thus alerting pretty much anything nearby. Naruto, however, was fine as the shadows blended in with the black kit very well, but he decided to put back on his S10 respirator and his hood over his head to cover his sun-kissed blonde hair. Come on, you maggots. The spider's nest has been destroyed. Find the ones who are responsible and catch them. I don't care how you do it. Flay them, gut them, eat them alive, I don't care. War boss Osric demands this. Naruto heard shouting and clattering of boots and armor coming from over in the distance, as he could see probably a whole platoon of them, which is probably a scouting party or the guards of this place. Their accents sounded a lot like how Tolkien's orcs sounded, except they are speaking in this world's language. The orcs' tone was rough, hoarse and aggressive like a wild beast. There they are, on the slope. A goblin archer screeched. Ooh, they look tasty. A fat piggish orc said while licking his lip. And juicy, another said, smacking his lips together. Forget food, they like really ripe for good use, he, an orc said lecherously. Don't just stand there ogling scum, capture them, ordered the scouting leader, who was wearing blood-red scavenged iron-plated armor with spikes on the shoulders and a serrated and jagged blade. Oh, do we really have to kill them? It will be such a waste. Aim for the legs, they don't need those. Yeah, all we need is the top part. Just as a few archers and crossbow users were lining up their shots. Ready, aim, fire. The leader was just about to shout out his order to fire until he was interrupted by a 7.62mm NATO round penetrating through his cranium and exiting through the other end. Air leader? Said the leader's second in command as he tapped him on the shoulder. The orders? He tapped him on the shoulder and the orc turned around, revealing the gaping hole in the back of his head, and then fell into the fiery abyss below. The leader's dead. I am in command now. Archers, fire the arrows. You lot scout the area and find the scumbag who was responsible. PSSHT. PHWIP. Another silent shot was discharged out of the sniper rifle, hitting an archer who had tried to fire an arrow at them. Naruto was trying to give the girls enough time before they arrive in the deep end safely. He doesn't want them to get wounded early. Naruto then turned on his mic. Ghislaine, be advised, I have spotted several orcs trying to take pot shots at you. They are focusing their aim though and attempting to immobilize you. Typical orc behavior, they always want the females alive so they could violate us later. And then keep us for later uses for other orcs. What would likely happen if they were to find me? Then you would be the lucky one out of all of us, as they don't like males, so they just simply kill, torture for amusement and eat them alive. Therefore you would be getting a swift death, which I find that more preferable. Maybe for you, but wait, are there females amongst their kinds like the orcs, ogres and trolls? Oh fucking hell. Don't ask that, I'd rather not know. He quickly knocked the images out of his head. Or they would give you to the more aggressive ogre and troll females so they could rape you. Ghislaine said bluntly. Yep, I think I will just be killing myself if it comes to that. Actually, from what I have seen, the females are much more better looking than the males. Most of them do look a bit brutish, but they still have their feminism. Akane added her thoughts in to make me even more confused about the situation just so she could tease me. Wait, is this a good thing or a bad thing you are talking about? And do the orcs have females? Depends how you look at it, and no, the orcs are made differently to breeding, but the female ogres and trolls do tend to get really wild when they are in the mood from what I have heard. If you were a weaker man, then they could snap you like twig. Akane joked. Okay, that is a bit too much information, and how the hell am I in a better situation than you lot? You have a chance at dying honorably if the orcs kill you first rather than getting your mind broken from the endless rape. Ghislaine said again bluntly. I may still get the same treatment as you lot, but honor has nothing to do with this, and this is our lives on the line we are talking about here. I will be damned and dead if I let them take you for their sick pleasures. Naruto holstered his sniper on his back and brought out his L8582, SAW 88-2 bullpup assault rifle with grenade launcher and the magazine taped together so they could be flipped over to the next magazine if one runs empty. Listen, get to the top and go. I will attract their attention over to me. Are you crazy? Are you planning to get yourself swarmed? Ghislaine sounded shocked that he would suggest such a thing. It's not like it has happened before, but I still got out of it in the end. Take my bag and go. Naruto, you can't fight them all on your own. She warned him. The regiment that I served does this stuff all the time, it is what we do. We have always fought against the odds even in dire situation when the tables are turned against us. But we are the ones who will always get the job done, always staring at the face of danger and even death. Hence why we always stand by our motto, who dares wins. He said to them before turning the radio off. He pulled the bolt back and armed his rifle, attached an oxygen canister to his respirator filter and checked over his equipment. He made sure he secured most of his weapons to his back so they won't get in the way but will be easy to switch weapons. He then rushed to where the orcs are at, fully intent on taking them out. And he didn't care if he was going in loud. He reached a chest-high rock that served as decent cover and immediately went into a crouch behind the rock. Just before the orcs and goblins could shoot another volley out, Naruto lined up his sights on his AG-36 40mm grenade launcher and fired at their feet with a high-explosive grenade. Bang! The explosion echoed everywhere and the orcs were spooked by the sudden explosion as the grenade projectile exploded underneath the unfortunate ones, tearing their legs off from the blast added with the shrapnel. Some of them were even launched in the air and fell into the abyss as well. Hey, what just happened? The second-in-command roared out of his rag face mask and spiked helmet and scratched and dented armor that was painted over with blood. Then suddenly multiple shots were fired, killing the archer and crossbowman with instant kill shots to the headshot and upper torso. Some of the orcs who were pumped up full of adrenaline and rage took a few shots to the torso, but they refused to go down. Bang! 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 Naruto fired one shot at a time in semi-automatic for accuracy and conserving his ammo unless he was forced to go into full auto. Then the orcs located the sound and saw the flashes coming out of this strange weapon like a staff spitting out powerful concentrated fireballs. Each shot coming out the barrel had illuminated the area around him. When the orcs had a good look at him, they could tell it was a man due to the physical structure, but the apparel was odd and quite frightening. Its eyes were pitch black and so was his body, blended into the shadows. But the orcs were very stubborn creatures and they rarely back off in a fight. It's just one man get, I am, you bunch of gits. The now orc leader of the party roared out his orders, to which the orcs roared out their war cry, Wog. Come and get some of this, you ugly bastards. He taunted while gesturing his hand in a come over here if you think you're hard enough motion. That did the trick as they were goaded into charging without any form of strategy, as the orcs only knew one strategy, and that is being battle fodder and charging the front in multiple waves. Naruto stood up and advanced slowly while picking off the orcs one by one, making sure to aim for either center mass or headshots only, as the orcs seem to be quite tolerant to pain when they are pumped up on battle adrenaline and would take some concentrated shots in the right places to take them down for good. After 11 orcs were gunned down, Naruto switched mags by flipping the mag over and slotted the other taped mag that was on the bottom of the now empty mag. and this time switched the firing mechanism to full auto as they had gotten closer and they were bunching up together. He sprayed his whole mag at the clumps of orcs as their armor proved nothing towards the onslaught of a 5.56 by 45mm NATO rounds punching through their flesh and armor like nothing. Naruto could smell the rotten odor of the orcs through his mask, and he realized that he hadn't fastened on the canister properly to let the air be filtered through and quickly switched it so it was. "Bloody hell, you stink!" He insulted them while making the gesture as if he was pinching his nose and wafting the air. One pig-faced orc got close enough to attempt to cut him in half, but Naruto just rammed the barrel into the pig's snout. "Squeal piggy. Ski." The orc squealed in rage just before Naruto blasted his snout and the back of his head off, spewing chunks of the orc's brain matter and blood on the orcs behind them as they stood still in shock. "Damn, that's nasty," Naruto commented in disgust as he pulled out the barrel to see blood added with the pig's snot on his barrel and proceeded to wipe the barrel clean on the pig's rags. The orcs snapped out of their stupor and let out another roar and continued their charge. Naruto swung round and brought up his rifle only to hear the sound of an empty magazine and chamber. "Crap, sod that. New gun," he cursed as he switched to his sidearm and shot another orc in the face as it tried to gut him with a pike. "Try harder, you smelly green bastards," he said insultingly in his muffled voice. He may have contradicted himself as a hypocrite when it comes to racism, but all bets were off if they were attacking him. After a few orcs had been shot down, he decided to switch to melee and unsheathed his kukri in his left hand and a tomahawk in his right. "Blue Stolly. Ultranum instrumental or with vocals, take your pick. Crops, trees, orcs. They all fit the same category, they all get cut down." Naruto commented as he sidestepped an orc's overhead swing and heel-kicked the orc in the back, sending him down the trench, and the orc howled all the way down to the bottom until he crashed onto the floor. 6 orcs came at me at 1-2 with scavenge blades that were battle-worn, an axe, a club, a mace and a dagger for a goblin. One orc tried to go for a stab into my gut, but Naruto struck his hand off with his tomahawk and stabbed him instead in the worn leather cuirass with the sharp kukri blade cutting straight through, proving the useless armor no good against the sharpness and high grade of steel that this was made from. Then he twisted the blade and forced the blade out of his right side, and he swung it round and cut through Anther Orc at the joint of his arm that was holding an axe meant for him. And the orc howled in agony while he clutched the stump of where his upper arm used to be. The gutted orc collapsed on his knees, holding out his guts in his hands as they spilled out, and Naruto put him out of his misery by driving the spiked tip of the tomahawk into his skull. Another orc tried to bring down a heavy club onto him, but Naruto countered with a high kick into the beast's jaw with finesse and power that shattered the orc's teeth and stunned his sense. Naruto clutched onto the tomahawk hard and brought the spiked tip out of the twitching orc's skull and aimed the blade of the axe into the bigger orc's own. Only for the orc to regain his sense, and with surprising speed the orc grabbed onto the arm Naruto had his tomahawk in and squeezed tightly, forcing Naruto to let go of his tomahawk while roaring into his face, sending out spit onto his mask. "Let go, you bastard," he shouted back to the orc, and he slashed the orc's hand off, and the orc bawled out as it recoiled in pain as blood poured out of the amputated limb. Naruto slashed both of the orc's kneecaps at the soft part at the back, completely immobilizing him as he crashed down onto his knees. Naruto grabbed onto the back of the orc's head with greater strength that overpowered the orc's own strength, and he unsheathed his Sykes knife and plunged it straight into the orc's throat, and then he pulled it out again, and again, and again, and kept on doing it, picking up the speed like he was a blur. Then he started slashing open the stab wounds as more blood splashed out of the wound, and Naruto made no cry or shout as he was cutting open the orc's neck with a 5-inch blade. Have never seen anything like it. This one man had killed most of the orcs in their party barely under a minute, and he was overpowering one of the biggest orcs in the party, third in command due to the large size of the orc. And to see this orc overpowering him, they were not so sure, and they started to feel fear from him. The leader sensed the fear off of his subordinates and had seen the whole disappointing fight of his orcs against this wretched human. "Gah, you're all useless, I might as well do this sodding thing myself." He unsheathed his own jagged sword and picked up the former leader's own sword that he had dropped earlier. He stomped over to the masked SAS operator standing tall and acting big. And big he was, certainly bigger than the one he had killed. The orc he had killed was around 6 feet too. This one was 6 feet 5 and built like a heavyweight boxer. He then started spinning his blades all theatrically like a windmill that made Naruto sigh at this tedious display. Naruto didn't move a muscle, to which the orc head dumbly took it that he was intimidating him. "You think you are the biggest and baddest round here, I? But look at you all petrified, can't move a muscle. Well, you shall feel the orcish might of my dual-bladed style that has slain over 1,000 me bang." He was interrupted by a loud discharge of Sig Sauer 9mm pistol and a very unimpressed Naruto. The orc had been silenced as the bullet went through his skull and out the other end, hitting the inside of his helmet. "Shut the fuck up. Can't you tell that I wasn't even paying any attention to caring about your empty threats? Well, technically you can't because I am wearing this scary mask, you see," Naruto said coolly with no hints of interest in what the orc was saying. The orc just slowly fell back and crashed onto his back. The orcs all shuffled back nervously at the powerful weapon Naruto wielded. Naruto turned back to the petrified-looking orcs. "Ooh, sorry, was he your leader? The leaders are dead. They were the strongest in our group. How can a mere single man kill many of us in short time? That is no mere man, that is a demon. It's a Black Knight of Emeroi." Naruto tilted his head at that. "Who or what the fuck is Emeroi?" Naruto muttered to himself. The orcs were about to turn around and run until they heard war drums banging on in the distance, and they all could see multiple lights of torches irradiating passageways and bridges. The drums were also mixed with battle chanting. "Listen, the rest of the boys are coming. Yay, why we running when we now have the numbers?" The orcs that were considering about running suddenly regained there and turned around to face him again, only to see an absent Naruto who only left an outline of his appearance, and the tomahawk was missing from where it had landed earlier. "Where'd he go?" The orcs scratched their heads. Naruto had left by the time the horns had sounded and the drums were beating. "Time to scarper," he said to himself while running in the direction of the ruined city. While running over a bridge that led away from the incline where he knew where the girls were at. "Right, I know if I go in the direction of the city it would lead them away from the girls, but why haven't I seen anyone yet?" He thought to himself while running through the streets as he could hear them gaining on his trail. "Hello, this will do." He went into an alleyway that was like a maze. Naruto didn't go through the maze like an idiot, but instead he jumped up and climbed the wall and onto a building like a parkour free runner, except that they were not carrying all this weight behind their backs. He then laid still and kept quiet. He heard them marching up to where he was at and then past the building he was on, believing that he went through the alleyways. When they were gone, Naruto took off again and went to find a vantage point somewhere preferably high up. He looked around as he could clearly see his surroundings better than in the trench. Naruto then saw that the closest and biggest building was a coliseum. That place had plenty of cover to move about, Naruto thought for sure. Naruto got up from the roof and looked out for any more incoming orcs or any other creatures for that matter. Finding that the coast was clear, he decided to jump from roof to dodge the tricky mazes of the alleyways. After a few roof hoppings, Naruto had lost his footing as the roof had gave way underneath him and he crashed through the roof. Cursing his luck as he landed in a room which was probably the dining room, he got himself back up on his feet and brushed himself off. "Ow, that hurt," he mumbled to himself. And that was when he noticed a shadow on the wall in front of him. One was his shadow and there was another shadow of a person behind him, and the figure was raising a club. Realizing the danger, he immediately ducked down. "Hyaa!" came a voice that swung the club but missed as it only hit air. Strangely, it sounded female, and a rather cute one too. I quickly whipped out my sour pistol and spun around to face the possible threat, and to add to my shock was another humanoid creature, an ogre, but female. I had pictured in my mind that the ogres were just as ugly as the orcs. While some orcs looked normal like Tolkien's orcs, but there were some that were classed as pig men and had the head of a pig. It was more like I had strangely pictured Fiona out of Shrek, but this ogre's skin color was light, a natural tan instead of unnatural green skin. The ogre was tall, nearly as tall as Cathal, but few inches shorter but more slender in build than Cathal, but her strength was nothing to laugh at if she could carry that club around like a stick. Her head. But this one had denied my expectation of that by a long shot. "Who are you? You do know it is bad to trespass on people's property," the ogre said sweetly, but it was hard to picture her as sweet innocent being when she about took off my head with a club with metal studs on the end that was most likely scavenged or borrowed off of some place or someone. Well, I do apologize for that, but I am on the run from multiple orcs wanting to tear me apart. So it was you they were after, said another voice. This one was a more stern and militaristic, authorizing tone as she told the ogre to stand down but turned to look at me with a serious look. Thanks to you we were almost caught due to your rampage we heard earlier. Well, how was I supposed to know you were in the city? And for your information, that was entirely my plan to draw most of their forces here in the city so they won't find my heir temporary traveling companions. Are they friends of yours? The ogre tilted her head cutely. We only met today. Naruto shrugged. They were good people and I couldn't just allow them to be caught, so I volunteered myself to be the distraction, so I went into the city to draw most of them here. I didn't mean for you to get caught in it as well, miss. I am Lady Ezra County Vila, captain of the Order of the Rose Knights. She stated out rather proudly in her own noble light. Speaking of light, her armor was too fucking shiny and gaudy for my tastes that make me want to tactical face palm at the fact that it makes her a living target. Her armor looked more ornamental than practical with all of the floral designs on it. Picture the manga armor of the Rose Knights instead of the anime, as the manga had more detail to it, because it looks more appropriate for a knight order with that armor mainly consisting of children coming from noble families. The knight who I could now see when she stepped into the natural light was a light purple-haired hair styled that went down to her back with indigo-colored eyes. Everything about her screamed nobility. Nice to meet you, Ezra. I am. That's my lady to you, commoner. A feisty orange-haired had interrupted me and pointed rudely in my face. She had her long bright orange hair did in a knotted bow that tied her long hair into a ponytail. So? Naruto shrugged uncaringly. The knights twitched in vexation at his uncaring attitude, especially the purplet who was displeased and the orange-haired knight who was furious at his blatant disrespect. Such rudeness, I demand you to show respect for your betters this insta. She demanded. No. Naruto interrupted her, not caring at all. What do you mean no, you filthy peasant? Now Naruto felt that this tie of character in a person he would love to make suffer the most if given the chance. Exactly what I meant, as in no bloody way, not a chance in hell, and sod off, you muppet. He casually said. How dare you? WWWAH. She murmured as I stepped out of the dark corner and into the light, showing all of the 4 knights and ogre in the room my appearance. I'm sorry, you were saying. What are you? Some sort of demon? Come again? I'm as human as you lot are. Naruto just looked at her funny. Not with a face like that, she said rather uncomfortably, with Naruto staring at her, unnerving her. It's a mask, you dold. He deadpanned behind his mask and tilted his head and held out his hands. Grr. Then why can't we see your eyes? Naruto moved his hand up to lenses and detached the filter lenses, revealing his deep cerulean blue eye that looked so captivating to anyone that stared into them. Cool trick, huh? He chuckled at the reaction and popped the lenses back onto his mask's eyepiece. May we see your face? Ezra requested of him. Why? Because I want to know if we can trust you? You will have to earn that right first, along with my respect, Ezra. Naruto didn't have the time for games, and he didn't care if he was pissing off the 4 knights in the room and this world's authority. You've already wasted enough of my time already. You either tell me what the hell you are doing here and with Miss. What's your name, Miss? Naruto turned to the blonde-haired ogre. I'm Tionisha, but please call me Tio instead. She replied back in a light-hearted way and gave a cheerful wave despite the tense situation that the knights were emitting. Nice to meet you, Tio, and back to the topic, and who are you? Where did you come from? What is your reason to be here exactly? Naruto nodded to her out of respect. He liked her for some reason, always able to remain calm by being lighthearted despite the situation. There must be some sort of misunderstanding with this ogre, as it seems that not all of them were pictured as bad as they sounded to be. Who are you to dare to order us? Sergeant Maelstrom of the British SAS, and we always dare. It's in our fucking motto, it's how we win. SIS? Never heard of them, and where is this country you speak of? The leader mused to herself and then asked another question. Far, very far. Wait, you only gave us a title and not your real name, why won't you give us your name? The orange-haired girl butted in rudely. Because I don't know who you are affiliated with, and for all I know I'd rather keep my head low around here. So you're a spy, she accused. Hardly, I'm just Scout. Well, I was. Naruto scoffed. That still makes you suspicious, she said, not convinced with his response. My reasons for being here are my own now. Quit wasting my time or I will be straight out of the door. Naruto now had enough with the rough treatment and constant diversions of the topic. Are you crazy? You can't just leave us here. What if they come back? The young knight said in shock and felt uncertain about the orcs. You're knights, are you not? You have a blade at your side. Outside there are orcs. You can easily figure the next part out if they get in here, he said in a mock of uncaring, making his way to the door, to plant the seeds of doubt and fear in their minds. A common trick used to give away information. Wait, please help us. Tio pleaded to Naruto, who stopped and turned to face her. Tio was the first to give, but not out of fear it seems, but more out of concern for somebody else. Now Naruto was not one to turn a blind eye on those who were in need, even those who were of a different race. He just does not like having his time wasted by people who were ignorant and arrogant, who think they were above anyone else. Even the authority with some of the fresher forces in the police and army caused him some problems earlier on in his career, from time to time stopping him at the most inopportune moments during some operations because they thought he was cosplaying and snuck over the police lines and into firefights. It only took a few rounds of beasting them verbally and sometimes physically if they didn't get the message. Naruto, however, did spare some of his time if they were to just shut up and cooperate. For what reason should I help? I'm already in the deep end enough as it is. We're escaping, she said simply. I understand the knights, but why you in particular? Because I helped them. Did you now? With what exactly? She motioned for him to come over to him and Naruto followed. Captain? A knight said nervously while gripping the pommel of her sword, and the captain responded by raising her hand in a stand-down motion. Tio lifted a mat off of a pair of trapdoors that she opened them, and it led to a basement. A basement full of scared, crying and a few traumatized girls. They looked up to the basement doors when it opened, and let's just say that Naruto's mask and the breathing certainly did not help the mood. They shuffled away from the doors in slight fear, and a few cried out in fright. What the fuck is this about? Naruto turned back to the knights with a fire raging in his eyes. This time no games were to be played. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.